in charge.
You're in charge, buddy.
Oh, really? I don't know.
Hey, all planning board members, fire.
Making the protein shakes.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're getting ready to get started. Hello, I'm Armando Fana, Assistant City Administrator with the City of West Palm Beach. Thank you, Peter. I see a lot of folks who I know are in here for the Downtown Master Plan discussion that is going to be had with this workshop with the Downtown Action Committee. I also suspect there are a lot of folks in here who are curious or want to hear about a plan or a discussion that has been had in the public recently about a potential road reconfiguration of Flagler Drive in downtown. That is not what this meeting is about. That proposal is simply that, a proposal. There has been no decisions, no movement on that other than a concept that has been presented to the city. We're nowhere near anything happening on that. So I wanted to clarify, because I think a lot of folks may be confused with the two different things. This is simply a meeting about the downtown master plan. It has nothing to do with that Flagler Drive proposed realignment. This is a workshop for the Downtown Action Committee, and there will be an opportunity at the end around 7 p.m. for public comments. But again, those public comments will be about the downtown master plan, proposed changes, not about any potential concept of a Flagler Drive road realignment. So I just wanted to clarify that before you all get started and make sure folks aren't sitting here for the wrong reasons. With that, I'm going to introduce our Director for Development Services, Ana Maria Ponte, who will introduce this concept of the Downtown Master Plan Amendment. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ana Maria Ponte. I'm the Development Services Director. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. It's very amazing to have so many people interested in hearing what's going on with the downtown and what is the proposal. I want to thank the board members that they gave up a nice evening at home for hearing all this and providing us with your comments.
We were promised drinks and food.
Not allowed by the budget, I'm sorry. So the agenda for tonight is, of course, the welcoming remarks first. I'm going to do a brief introduction with some background information of what we are here and what has happened in the last 30 years. And then Mr. Bernard Siskovich is going to present the proposal for the Downtown Master Plan update, and we're going to go over also the next steps for this process. We're going to have after comments from the board, and at the end, we're going to entertain comments from the public. If you want to speak, please fill out the comment cards. Chris Kimberly has them. We need them. If you don't want to speak, you can also leave us comments, and we will get back to you with any questions, specific questions that you may have. This meeting is being recorded, and it will be posted on the on-demand channel for the City of West Palm Beach. So if you have other members that wanted to hear the proposals, this is going to be recorded and posted afterwards for everybody to watch. So again, we're going to go, the reason why we're here. We are here to present the recommendations for the Downtown Master Plan update and explain what is the zoning strategy behind the update that is being proposed. We're going to go over the next phase and getting feedback from the boards and the community to then start the approval process next month. But before I go into that, I definitely want to thank the Siskovich team, our consultants working with us in this process. They have been working endless hours along the city staff to present to you this proposal. Again, this is a draft document, so you will gonna find a lot of mistakes, a lot of things that we're still working on, but it's a draft document. We wanted to put it out there for the public and the boards to see and give us feedback, and then we will realignment and just present a final document in the May hearing. Before we start, I want to do some brief introductions and a little bit background information. I know everybody knows that we are the county seat, so we are living here and we know that, but I wanted to mention it for people that are new in the city or that are watching from other locations. The downtown area is the area that includes only the portion of the city between Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard, Okeechobee Boulevard, Flagler Drive, and the Clear Lake Australian. So it's only that area. It's around 500 blocks, and we have around 12,500 people living in this area. So just those are the boundaries that we're talking about. We're not talking about North Flagler or South Flagler, just the boundaries of the downtown. And just as put it as a context, we are in a very strong environment right now. Downtown is vibrant, the city is vibrant. All of you are excited about what is happening in the city. We have a lot of development, a lot of new projects coming in, and they have been coming for a while. And this is just to mention, and I'm gonna go back a little bit in history, that the city used to be a vibrant city in the early 1900s, right? It had a lot of activity, it was founded, it had a lot of commercial activity, and it was a vibrant downtown. But that was not the case after. In the 70s, we have all the stores left downtown, and we have pretty much streets that were vacant, that didn't have any activity, that the stores were not there, people were not staying there, the office buildings that still weren't there, people came in for the office and then left. So this is to say, we have changed a lot since then. If you look at these pictures, the one in the right is Clematis Street. The one on the left, we believe it was Bunyan. So a lot of empty storefronts and things that were not a vibrant downtown. After that, what happens is in the early 90s, the city and the community basically came together and say, we don't want this. We want a vibrant downtown. We want to change the appearance of our city, and we want to work through it. So for the last 30 years, we have been going through a process of bring back the downtown. And I'm just mentioning this because what we're doing today is one step more in this process. This started, I think, in the 90s with the city decided to start. A strong mayor was put in place for the city, and new strategies and new policies were implemented to basically direct the redevelopment of the downtown and the city as a whole in a new direction. The first master plan, it was drafted and adopted by the city in 1994. It was a document that was drafted by DPC, a very prestigious firm in urban planning, and introduced a new concept that was the form-based code. That was fundamental for the growth of the downtown, and the intention was to create a simpler code, but that was focused on creating a pedestrian-friendly environment and a proposal to create a mixed-use district. So 24-hour activity, a mix of commercial and residential uses, public spaces, streets where people can walk and people can basically entertain and enjoy. After that, we got a series of projects that were developed with that code, starting with incentives that were introduced at that time and increased the development capacity to promote the construction of the buildings downtown. At the beginning, the buildings where the developers were not coming downtown, it was not the demand. So the city created some incentives to attract that development. We got buildings that were built around that time with incentives like the 610 Clematis or the City Palms or the Metropolitan Building. Those were residential buildings that were built with the master plan, the original master plan from '94, with incentives created to attract the development. Then after that, in 2007, the city decided to look at that again. The city was changing, new development was coming, and things were evolving in a different direction. And the city decided that it was time to look at the master plan again and basically recalibrate the code with the new expectations and new desires of the city. So at that time, the city hired Siskovich. That is the same firm that is helping us this time. So thank you for coming back. We appreciate that. And then there were proposed changes in 2007. We went through the same process that we're going right now, was community input, workshops, back and forth with the regulation until a code was put in place, modifying the original master plan. The main premises of the downtown remained the same. We wanted a mixed-use core with a mix of activities, pedestrian environment, public spaces. But how that was crafted was modified to be more precise and be sure that we were getting the environment and the quality of life that everybody was expecting. So part of the proposals included managing the building forms, improving the public realm, and enhancing the quality of life. One of the big strategies that was proposed at that time was the reconnection of Clematis Street with City Place. And that resulted in what is known now as the Quadrille Business District, and is the area where we have 360 Rosemary and the Brightline Station and all that development that is basically an intensity of development connecting what was City Place with what was Clematis Street. It's still in the process, it's still vacant parcels in there, so it's, again, an evolution on the process of the construction of the city. One of the main changes that was introduced in 2007 was the change from a form-based code to a FAR-based code. This was fundamental because originally the code basically allowed specific parameters for construction of the buildings with a set height. What the form-based code introduced, the FAR-based code introduced in 2007, it was a flexible environment where the envelope of the building was larger than the building itself. So the architectural creativity and flexibility for the developers was provided to allow for open spaces on the ground floors in compensation for additional height. The buildings were set back further to provide for sidewalks and space for trees, and all those elements that are a lot of details that go into place when we are drafting the code. Sometimes we get bogged in all those details, are very technical, but those are the ones that create the forms that everybody enjoy. We produce buildings like these ones with this code. So in my perspective, it has been very successful. So buildings like this one also, we have residential, commercial, offices, all sorts of buildings creating new public spaces, new streets with trees, new aligned with active uses and new variety in the downtown. So where are we right now? This is a table that I put together because I find it very fascinating how much the downtown has grown. These are numbers only for the downtown. In 1994, we have 2,600 units downtown. Today, actually these numbers are from last year, we have over 8,800 units. So that's a substantial growth of units in the downtown, residential units, people that now live in the downtown that possibly work in the downtown, so the mixed environment is being achieved. The same way that non-residential uses, like the office projects, from 8.1 million, we have now 10.4, and the projection of the buildings that are under construction is incredible, and the ones that are coming also are important. So this is just to say that the growth has been amazing in the downtown, that we are in a good place, that the people want to come downtown, that we are enjoying the space in the downtown. But we also need to recalibrate again, and that's why we are here, trying to figure out what are the things that have worked, what are the things that need to be adjusted, and how we can maintain the quality of life in the downtown. And with that, I'm going to turn it to Bernard Siskowicz to go over their proposal.
Hello, everybody. I was expecting a small group of people for a focused conversation with the board in the workshop, and I'm so happy that we're so popular. All kidding aside, the conversation that we want to have tonight is actually not about probably why many of you are in the room, but in another way it actually is. Because what we're going to be presenting is a vision plan for the next 20 or 30 years. The end result is zoning. But zoning is, in a sense, maybe the recipe. But the vision is deciding what we're going to make. So we're going to start with the vision plan because the recipe, as any of you who cook, is always based on what you intend to make. So buying ingredients doesn't get there. You have to decide what it is you want the future to look like. So with that in mind, what we're looking at is a growing core to a nationally recognized urban destination. So this is a simple statement, but I have to say that when we were here last time, West Palm Beach, by comparison, was a sleepy town. We were trying to figure out how to incentivize maybe one Class A office building, maybe a new hotel, how to get people to want to live downtown. And we came up with these ideas about how to really, as Anna Maria so eloquently spoke, a lot of detail and a lot of precision about how to keep things flexible. And that sounds like a statement that doesn't make sense, but when you think about zoning and you think about prescribing, you don't want every block and every building to look the same as every other block and every other building. It doesn't create a quality of life, and it doesn't create variety and interest. So we devised a code that basically has some parameters that are very simple. You take your lot area and you multiply it by a ratio, and that's called your floor area ratio. And if you have 10,000 square feet of lot area and you have an FAR of 2, that means you're allowed to build 20,000 square feet of building. It's a very simple concept. The problem is every architect is going to want to make it in a different way, which is, I think, what adds richness. So the zoning code is intended to give direction on what is actually necessary. So we were successful, I think, at what you see around us, because the downtown, I think, and a lot of people think, has a really great character, and we're very proud of what was constructed. But the key point on this slide is nationally recognized urban destination. There's a lot of people headed this way. And it's not just the people, it's the industry, it's the businesses, it's Vanderbilt, it's Cleveland Clinic, it's world-class new businesses and people that have focused on West Palm Beach. And I think, to frame it all up, that's why we're here. We're here to try to say, well, the code we had before is not really adequate to manage the flow that's coming. So what you're going to see tonight is the next iteration of the growth of the city. Now, success brings challenges. There's more congestion. It's hard to get in and out of the city at rush hour. Housing affordability is an issue that has come up nationwide, actually. Access to transit and mobility. You know, the good news is the transit is really a fantastic thing, because you have more train access than any city I know in Florida. You've got Tri-Rail, you've got Brightline, you've got commuter rail eventually happening, and everything is within walking distance. But the mobility, the ability to have and ensure a walkable city, a place where you can ride your bike, the kinds of other alternative mobility issues, is something that we want to protect and enhance. And then, not least, is the issue of development pressure. So the map shows you at the center of the target where we are today, and we're looking at an area this large as the regional center of where everybody's coming in to do work, to come into the downtown. We're going really from what's it called? What's the name of the town? Anyway, we have a large area of access from the western edges of West Palm all the way to the north and the south. So we're looking at how we can manage the growth. The downtown for everyone is really the objective. So how we developed the zoning recommendations was to begin to look at the culture that's been developed and how we enhance it, transportation and mobility, community development issues, and open space and resiliency. So when we get to it, we're looking at a vision for the future that will be the basis for what the zoning that you're going to see today has been intended to produce. So to be right at it, the TOD QBD, the circle that you see, the area between Brightline and Tri-Rail, we think is going to become an innovation and transit and education core. It's really the part of the city, we probably would all agree, the part of the downtown that has the most potential for urban redevelopment. And we're really looking at that very carefully. We want to maintain the character of historic neighborhoods. We want to preserve the character of clematis, and we need to protect the existing core of the downtown. We also are dealing with Flagler Drive and the buildings there that no longer have the protection of the referendum. So we'll also end up looking at the eastern edge of the overall downtown. From the transportation and mobility perspective, we're looking at a western multimodal hub. I'm sorry the map is hard to read, but on the western edge, we're looking at the potential of a multimodal hub for the tri-rail area, so that we could bring people in, get out of the car, end up in a large parking structure, and end up with shuttles so we don't have to have everybody driving through the whole city. We're also looking at the convention center transit area, because we know that the garage at the convention center is underutilized most of the time, so we think that's another opportunity. We have learned that there's 40,000 people a day that go to Palm Beach through this corridor. If we could get them out of their car and develop a transit connection, we could end up decongesting a lot of the city. We're looking at creating walkable, what we call slow streets. We're looking specifically at Sapodilla, and we're looking at Flagler Drive as an opportunity for some change, because we think that there's opportunity there that was not the intent of this evening's conversation, but is part of our vision plan. And then we're looking at connecting across the rail where Nora is currently being built, and reconnecting the eastern edge of the city and the Nora area, so that we can begin to possibly build pedestrian bridge overhead and begin to involve connectivity, especially into the Northwest District, where it doesn't exist today in a very robust way, which is why it's been underdeveloped. And then finally, we have community development, where we want to build partnerships for learning. We want to activate underutilized public land. We want to support the Northwest District. We want to encourage mixed-use development across the entire downtown area. And we need to modify and balance FAR and height, so that we have opportunity for new development that's going to be the right approach for the downtown. And then finally, the vision includes open space and resiliency. We're looking to try to understand how we can better connect the waterfront to Clear Lake. We also are looking at a central park that we've been talking about now for almost a year, which is a redefinition of the waterfront at Flagler, and how we're going to support that with new zoning and new opportunities that would allow for West Palm to finally have what it deserves, which is a fabulous new, park system that has all of the amenities that a downtown that's evolving would benefit from. And we're also looking at what are the implications for mobility, for traffic, for all the other things that would happen. So when you put it all together, we're looking at those four basic priorities, as I said earlier, in terms of what we're hoping to achieve, where we want to go, and then the rest of the process is going to be how do we develop the zoning to make sure that we get what it is that we're looking for. Now, one of the things about the downtown that we've noticed, which is actually everywhere that we work, is a theory that we believe is true, which is that all cities or neighborhoods are in a constant state of evolution. So the zoning code and the conceptual framework of what we're looking for basically deals with the fact that we have parts of the city that are highly performing, like City Place and the downtown core, where we have tremendous enthusiasm, high property values, great quality of life, landscaping, all the things that we know. And then all the way through, we have areas that are in evolution. They're improving, they're thriving. We have areas that are growing, and then we also have areas, frankly, that haven't changed much in the last 20 or 30 years, specifically the Northwest District. And we're going to talk a little bit tonight about how we're going to be addressing all of those different areas. So quality of life translates into zoning tools because the zoning is the process by which we can allow or disallow what happens in the downtown. And we're looking at everything from breaking down very large blocks, by example, the TOD area between Brightline and Tri-Rail. Those blocks are enormous. We need to encourage new development, but we don't want buildings that are 700 feet long. We need to deal with setbacks because what you see on the street, most people believe is the first 50 feet. Once you get above that, if you push the tower back or you leave it on the street, you get a very different point of view. So we're looking at setbacks and step backs and different devices that we can use to modulate the new growth. We're looking at preserving views and shaping the skyline. We're looking at incentives. We're looking at parking podium caps, because as buildings get bigger and bigger, if we're going to continue to believe that the car is the answer for everything, we're going to end up with enormous parking structures that are there to service all of the people that want to come here. So we're looking at capping it so that we can make sure we don't have an excess. We're also looking at redefining how much parking each use is going to have. Now, I don't know if you've been to Miami lately or San Francisco or lots of other cities in the country, but I don't know, have you heard of Waymo? So I don't know if there's Waymo here in West Palm, but I got to tell you, it's all over Miami now, and 6 months ago, I never saw one. And those are autonomous cars, no driver, and that is just the beginning of change in the way that we move around our cities, and that's why we believe that there's another good reason why we should be looking at garages, because over time, we don't need so many parking spaces. That's not how we're going to be getting along. So that is entering into the thinking. Additional green space, public realm, and then, of course, the things that most people are used to talking about, height and floor area, and then for those things that we don't have enough of, we're also looking at incentives. So when you put it all together, it's a very complex set of ingredients that we need to think about in order to think about how we define what it is that we expect to get. So, notwithstanding the Palm Beach Post article and why I believe so many of you might be in the room, which I was not expecting, we thought that before we get into the zoning specifically, we could maybe take a few minutes for the board and see if you have any questions or comments about this conversation about the vision. Does anyone have a question or comment about what it is we've just talked about?
We'll just go around the room. Yeah.
Are you on the board? No.
Any of the board members, if
We're only taking board questions.
if you've had any research or read anything or have any specific questions, why don't we just start at one end and run around and do it like that?
I mean, if they have any questions at this point, we're going to have the rest of the presentation, but if they want to say something for the vision.
Specific for this, and then we're going to come back later for board discussion.
There'll be more discussion, but it's kind of a long presentation, so we thought maybe break it down.
But I think we can keep going.
Keep going. Okay. So the purpose of this update: direct growth to the right place, ensure development provides public benefits, protect neighborhood character, improve the public realm, and enhance the quality of life. Very similar to the objectives that we had last time. But I want to tell you this. Last time, we were trying to get things sparked. Now we're trying to make sure that we're going to manage growth, that we're going to allow for things to happen, but we're not going to allow for us to get overwhelmed by them. So that is a big part of our objective, and we want you to keep that in mind as we go. So the tools that we have are really simple. The definition is complex, but the tools are pretty simple. We have height and FAR, which we're calibrating again because of the demand factor that is so intense. And then we're looking at incentives that produce public benefits. So by and large, those are the big picture items that affect all the myriad of details. So when we look at the overall downtown, this is the existing. The dark red is 25 stories, and then it goes down to 12 to 10. But with incentives, we go up again. So we had base height and we had incentives. Now, the reason that that happened back then was because when we came into the process, we inherited transfer of development rights, TDRs. And the TDRs were available to purchase, and the purpose of TDRs at the time was to protect historic buildings and allow them to be monetized by giving up the area they were entitled to and sell it to a development so that the development could use that extra. So we basically had a base and we had an extra. And now that we're all these years in, we're realizing that a lot of the TDRs that are available are running out, but yet there's reason to keep that system going. So we're looking at a base and a bonus. And the bonus would be purchased in the same way that the TDRs would be purchased, but they would have specific funding objectives as a way of incentivizing things that we want built, but the benefit of the money would be to incentivize the things that would normally need additional money. So we're looking at charging for the bonus and then using the bonus, as Anna Maria will be discussing, for affordable housing, for transit objectives, for things like that. So there's already a history here in this city of this kind of trade-off. And we're rebalancing all of that again. So with the incentive heights, we're back up at 25 stories, 20 stories, et cetera, 15. So that shows you there's the base height, and there's the areas that were allowed to be incentivized. So it was not everywhere. Say again? That's the key. Okay.
No, it's
Proposed
existing.
incentive height. Huh? Yes, the existing. Did I not say that correctly? Okay. And here's the proposed. So we're looking at increasing the area of incentive and allowing for more development. And as you can see, the major differences between the Bright Line and the Tri-Rail. So in the downtown core, the area in the blue is where we have the most change. The area outside the blue is very negligible. So we're protecting the periphery of the downtown. We're allowing for those neighborhoods to get additional benefits, but not have additional height and floor area in a very meaningful way. And then we're raising the opportunity in the Quadrille Business District, the TOD District, the Flagler Waterfront, and the Quadrille Garden District. So the areas that we have no change are the Nora, the Okeechobee Business District, and City Place. Mostly no change is Brailsford Park, Northwest Neighborhood, Clear Lake, Clematis, and the Cultural District. The area that we're clarifying and making some modifications, but not of any great significance, is Providencia Park, Quadrille Gardens, and Lofton. And the places where we see the most growth are Quadrille Business District, the TOD, and the Flagler Waterfront. So you might say, why are we doing that? So we're going to take a few minutes and go through that. One is we want to protect the downtown character. So as we expect more people to come, we're going to be working toward street classification updates, because in the zoning code, if you're on a primary street, you have to have active uses on the ground floor. You need to activate the buildings. As we grow the city, we're going to need more, because we need to make sure that any new projects that come in also give back to the feeling of the street. And we're going to make sure that we want to achieve active ground floor uses. We're adding in additional building design standards, and we're going to be maintaining and enhancing the pedestrian quality of the street. So as a result, we have street hierarchy, more streets designed as primary pedestrian, and wider sidewalks by converting to primary pedestrian. So one of the peculiar things about West Palm that we discovered when we were here years ago is the property lines, unlike most cities, was not very useful in terms of determining where the setback should start, because when the city was being platted and evolving, the property lines were not necessarily contiguous along the street. We had very ragged property lines. So we came up with this idea that I don't think anyone that I'm aware of has ever used, which is that we have our setback from the edge of the street, the curb. So in primary streets, I think we have 16 feet. So if you want to build a new building, it doesn't matter where your property line is. Your sidewalk will be 16 feet, even if it is on your own property. So that way we can ensure pedestrian mobility that's comfortable. Now, if you walk downtown here, like I do and all of you do, you can walk 2 or 3 abreast. You don't have any problem. You don't have obstacles. You've got great streetscapes. We want to make sure that whatever happens in the future maintains that. So by creating more primary streets, we actually are creating more sidewalk. And we're pushing the buildings further back from the curb of the street, and we're able to use that device, and we're not necessarily tied like every other city to where the property line is. So that's just one example of what we're doing. So on the left, we have the existing street classifications, and you can see maybe the difference between the green and the purple. And on the right, you can see that we now have much more green. We have a lot more active streets that will be the result of it. So as this new zoning code comes into play, you're going to be able to sustain and maintain additional elements of activity. The other thing is limiting the tower length. So we're really back to the vision. We're after a city that has slender towers, not towers that occupy the whole block. So we have the place that you can grow the base, which has parking and retail and other things. A lot of places you're going to have to line the parking with apartments so that we're on the street, we're not looking at garages. We're looking at apartments and residential uses. But as I mentioned earlier, we're capping the height of the parking. So that leaves the tower. Now, what most cities do is they allow the tower to be in the same plane as the parking, and therefore, when you look at the city from a distance, the only gap you have is the width of the street. So we're looking at and proposing a couple of different tools that we're going to use to make sure that we don't end up with an uninterrupted tower line across the entire city. One is we're going to limit the length of the tower. So if you have a large site, you're not going to be able to build a very, very long building that goes on forever. You're going to have to break it and allow for the gap within your own property. And then the other thing is you're going to need to make a more slender building depending on the site you're on so that we can leave a view corridor, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. So again, why are we doing that? Just like the pedestrian realm, we want the image of the city to be lighter, have more light, allow for the views to penetrate through into the city and out of the city. So what that means is we have decided that it's better to go taller than allow everything to be wider. Because as I mentioned before, and you can test this as you walk around, when you walk in the city on the sidewalk, most professionals and most people will say that you're really not going to see the wall of the building much beyond 4 or 5 stories, about 50 feet. Whether the tower is set back and goes up 10 stories or 20 stories usually is not even in your perspective. It's your perspective 2 or 3 blocks down, but it's not where you're walking. So the idea is, in order to have the best quality of walkable city, what we want to have is as much light and air, make sure that sunlight penetrates the city streets, not have big areas of shadow, and be able to feel like you're in a lighter, more clear environment. And that's why we're doing these moves. So in terms of the tower length strategy, we're limiting the area of the tower in length to be, at most places, 200 to 250 feet. And if you're on a corner and you own the whole block, you can go to 300, but that's only if you make an L and you create a shape to your building so that you don't end up with an overwhelming amount of building height occupying the entire block. In terms of the parking requirement, we're looking at a 25% reduction in parking minimums, no change in the residential districts, and we want to support mobility and shared parking. So we're looking at what we believe, and most people believe, is the future, which is over time, more and more shared parking, more and more autonomous, more and more alternative modes of travel. So we don't really want to be occupying the volume of the city with more and more parking. We're looking at reducing it. As far as the parking height, we're looking at limiting the large podium of garages. So the picture on the top is from Miami, where you can see the very high-end water-facing Biscayne Boulevard tower and what it looks like on the other street where you can look into all of the parking. We don't want that. We would rather have something like the lower picture where you're looking at apartments and then the tower sets back. Behind the wall of those apartments is parking. So we call them liners, and we're including liners everywhere in the code. The attorneys in the room know exactly what we're talking about. And that way we have a city that has lights that go on, they go off, you see people. It's a completely different experience. It feels like the building starts at the ground, not 50 or 60 feet in the air above the parking garage. And that makes for a much friendlier building. And in areas where we have a lot of activity, the minimum is 80% active use on street-facing floors. So the reason it's 80% is because we need stairways, which cannot be glass, and we need elevator cores and things like that. But 80% is really essentially almost 100% in terms of lining the building with active uses. So we feel very good about that. In terms of open space, we're looking at increasing the open space because we're increasing the density. We're looking at larger projects much contribute more. The increase in the minimum street canopy and vegetated areas We're establishing on-site pervious areas, so as it rains, the water goes into the ground. We need landscaping, we need environmental issues dealt with, and we want to improve the public realm as the city grows. So as the city gets more and more growing and intensified, we're also looking at getting more and more green space, which is why when we go back to the vision, we're promoting the idea of bigger parks, more open space, more landscape, because we're also increasing density and increasing height. So it's a trade-off. I'm sure you've all been in cities where there's not enough landscape, not enough parks, and really big buildings. That is not what we see for West Palm. We see this garden city feel continuing on the street. Even though there's more people here and there's more height to the buildings, we believe it's just going to get better and better. In terms of the open space strategy, we're looking at moving the water. In addition to the public realm, we're looking at drainage and shedding water from the high point, which I believe is Sapodilla. And then as it moves east and west, we would be capturing water in the public space of the city streets. And in terms of north-south, we would also be capturing it in a different way, where we would have areas of swale where we could collect water. So if we make the sidewalk large enough to plant trees and have landscape, then that landscape actually ends up helping us with our resiliency issues. And then finally, in open space, we're looking at transit and intensity TOD area. We're looking at currently, what is it, 5? Well, we have a variety of 3 and 5% of the lot area open space. We're increasing it to 5 and 7, depending on how much you're building. And then in the waterfront, Flagler Street area, we're looking at adding 5% and 10% additional more open space, so that we can have a really lush, open waterfront area. In the medium intensity areas, which are kind of on the edges, in the neighborhoods, we're not really making much of a change in terms of the open space, because we're actually not increasing density and height in a meaningful way. So we've left that alone, but the areas where we see the most change, we're saying you can build more, but it's kind of the opposite of what you would think. If I'm building more, you would think you're going to occupy more of the site with the building. In our case, we're saying if you're going to build more, you're going to occupy less of the site with the building, because you have to give more open space. So it's an interesting approach. Now, in terms of what that looks like, we have an above ground level setback strategy. So depending on where and how you want to build your building, this area in that blue kind of flat color on every block will not be allowed to be built upon in excess of 140 feet. So for the first 140 feet next to the street, we have what we're calling this setback strategy, and we're setting the towers back away from the street. So if you're going to have a lot of height, it cannot be right on the edge of the street. Huh? Right. Those deeper setbacks, I was going to get to that, are at Dixie and Clematis and Fern, because these are main corridors. We want to make sure we protect them, and we don't want them to be in shadow all the time. In terms of the view corridor, this one really applies to the Flagler district. We want to maintain the views to the waterfront, but large sites have to keep 40% open above the podium. So that yellow arrow is an area where you could not build your tower parallel to Flagler that covers the entire width of the block. You have to keep 40% of the block without the tower. So that means that as we look at the skyline from the intracoastal, you're not going to be seeing a wall of buildings. You're going to be seeing slender edges and towers that allow for the height, but don't allow for the width. And that's a critical issue in terms of the built environment, because we think in that way we can allow for more density and more intensity, but we're not going to be blocking the city off from the east and the west. And I think that that is a very important consideration. So once again, we inserted a Q&A piece if you want to have some questions. It's a lot to digest, and these are still principles. We haven't gotten to the details of how much FAR and how much height and all of that. But does anyone have any comments about the strategy?
I mean, Anna Marie, I suggest we just plow through the whole presentation, then we'll do questions at the end, unless anyone has any specific
Okay,
questions
so
right away.
we called that
Yeah.
one wrong.
Keep going. I think there's a lot of material.
So in the Quadrille Business District and the TOD, we're looking at innovation, technology, research, and educational uses. We also in this area have a lot of public service type buildings. We have governmental buildings. They occupy very large sites. We have quite a few surface parking lots. So we're looking at this as two perspectives. One is, where does the growth of the city most logically happen? Our conclusion is mostly between the FEC and Tri-Rail, because we have the most open space. We have a part of downtown that's really never been very much developed. And if we do develop it and we do it the right way, we'll be able to have the character of West Palm over time go all the way from the intracoastal all the way to Clear Lake. Those streets will be continuous. We'll have a much bigger sense of our downtown, and we'll have, because of the way we're setting it up, a lot of open space. We'll have a lot of active uses on the ground. We'll have more restaurants, more cafes. We'll have more quality of life. So we know that that's going to happen. The second issue is, by increasing the density and the opportunity, we're hoping that we can maybe nudge some of the larger governmental uses to either sell their property to a public-private partnership, possibly compress into a smaller footprint. We think the parking lots could maybe go away, and we could trade them for one parking garage instead of 3 or 4 blocks of surface parking. And so we're trying to set up two strategies. One is, what can we do with the privately owned land that would comply with this? The second is, how could we incentivize the existing uses to maybe move away or compress so that we could actually accomplish this goal? So the QBD is going through, and there's way too much detail for me to go through, but we're going from, think of it as 2 to 4 FAR with incentives, so that we're going to be able to build existing incentives, and then proposed incentives. We're going to be able to build significantly more buildings here. So we're looking at a similar idea in terms of how the towers are configured. They're not going to be massive, they're going to be slender, and they're going to have open space around them. And we're looking at a maximum height with incentives of somewhere around 25 stories. But as you can see in the diagram, the buildings are not allowed to occupy the entire frontage of the block. So we have these spaces where you will not be allowed to have height, so that the buildings become more like tower objects as opposed to continuous buildings. I don't know if anyone's ever been to Vancouver, but if you've been to Vancouver and you paid attention to the way the city was built, it's really a city of very small, slender towers. There's plenty of height, but when you're in the city, you have this really great feeling of all this light and all this air coming in through the city, and that is pretty much what we're going for. So we have very particular setbacks, a lot of open space, parking, height. We want the big blocks to be broken so that we have intermediate passageways, so that we don't have, some of those blocks are really, really long, and we need to break them down. And we still have our tower length requirements, so you can't build a continuous building. So we're allowing for a lot, but we're defining that you have a lot of regulations you got to get through in order to figure out how you're going to build it all. On the Flagler waterfront, we're looking at the issue of how to create, I know the city has been through this a few times, how to create a really incredible new central park for the city. This has nothing to do with the published article. We've been talking about this for a year. We actually thought of this 15 years ago, that this area at the waterfront deserves to have a world-class open space, and that the city should be doing whatever it can to figure out how to initiate that. This is not in our zoning because we're not proposing any buildings, but it is in our vision plan that with a new continuous waterfront, we would then allow for new buildings at Flagler, because we already have buildings that are up around 20, 25 stories and beyond, that we would require a really large setback from Flagler and allow for this new idea of the towers to pop up in what is probably the most valuable property of the entire city. So you've got that first edge of buildings, and you have this idea that we will be implementing, that you have to leave 40% of the frontage of your block above the podium clear of any tower. So if you think of a 60-40, that's a substantial amount of percentage that will not be encumbered by the tower, which will allow for a new skyline, which we think could be really beautiful, because when you have such valuable property, you also get the best designers and the best people creating the new projects. And we believe strongly that if we set up the opportunity to do something that's great, but we control how much they can do, we get the best of both worlds. We get something that is iconic, that's beautiful, that's going to be available to new people and existing people that can come in and live there or work there or whatever the use is. But we also know that from the city point of view, we're keeping the open space and the tower footprint limited, which means that we're going to have active uses and a lot of open space, and we're going to maintain the view corridors. And as we go through it, we're looking at, again, a lot of detail related to setbacks, the parking podium, and the building articulation. All of the area, if you look at the podium facing the lower part of the screen, even though there's a garage there, you will have to line it completely with active uses and apartments all the way up. So when you're on the waterfront, which we're imagining to be the new centerpiece of the downtown, you'll be looking at nothing but active uses, people living there, people working there, people having fun, and you're not going to be looking at parking garages at all. In the Quadrille Garden District, we have a similar approach, but lower scale, where we have our existing base and our existing incentives. The area facing Quadrille is currently at 25 stories. We're going to be redefining it so that we can be certain that the tower is, I think, 140 feet from Dixie. So we're not going to, we're proposing to not allow that height to be on Dixie. It has to be on Quadrille so that we can then retain the block in pink at a maximum of 15 with incentives. So we're looking for articulation and diversity in the height. We don't want to come back into the existing downtown that we've worked so hard to define and allow people to have an incentive to start tearing it apart. So we want to make sure that we have diversity and innovation in the open space and in the architecture that would allow for it. And with that, I'm going to ask Darius to come up and talk about the Northwest District.
Good evening, everybody. So now we're going to be discussing the Northwest District. This is a very different conversation compared to the downtown core that Bernard just spoke about. Here, the focus is not about growth intensity. It's more about protecting the neighborhood character, supporting the reinvestment of this neighborhood, and also improving the quality of life. So this zoning strategy for this neighborhood is based on conversations and feedback that we got from residents and stakeholders. And the priorities that we kept hearing every time we met with them was these four that you see on the screen. So first, maintaining the neighborhood character and historic identity. Second, providing affordable housing options. Third, improving streets, trees, and open space, which are the everyday quality of life aspects. Fourth, expanding opportunities for home ownerships, particularly through CRA efforts. And everything we're proposing are built around these four priorities. So it's important to note that the neighborhood is currently a mixed-use neighborhood of small-scale housing types, such as duplexes, triplexes, and small-scale building, multifamily buildings. So the goal here is not to introduce anything new. It's to make sure that the future development continues the pattern that we're seeing existing in this neighborhood. What we notice most about, or the key takeaway that you can see in this slide, is that we're not changing the main heights in this neighborhood. The core of the neighborhood stays no more than 2 to 3 stories as it is existing. What we're maintaining is generally that across the interior of the neighborhood, and the targeted, and there are some targeted adjustments, for example, small increases in density, and slightly higher allowances along major streets such as Tamarind and Rosemary, where we are allowing a bit more height in this area because they're on the edge of this neighborhood. So the goal is to preserve the overall scale of the neighborhood while allowing the right kind of reinvestment here. And these are the typologies that we're seeing here. So it's exactly what we've been mentioning that is currently in the neighborhood. Duplexes, walk-ups, cottage courts, multiplex, small-scale multiplex, and townhomes in certain areas. On the edges, we're going to be seeing a little bit more of intensity, such as existing developments that are already happening, with small-scale or medium-scale buildings, and walk-ups and townhomes and multifamily buildings. So one of the biggest concerns we've heard about are the front yards being taken over by parking. So the code includes standards. What we're proposing, the recommendations are including standards that limit how much of the frontage can be done with parking or surface parking. So the idea is that we can make sure that the street is focused on green spaces, open spaces, and porches, the entrance to the building, et cetera, and that the parking can be, as much as possible, be done through the alleys or on the side of the properties. That way we can maintain a better street character and improve the neighborhood livability of the Northwest District. Anna is gonna come and explain a little bit about incentive.
Thank you, Darius. Thank you, Bernard. So we're going to go now through a little bit of a more technical part Bernard explained how the whole code was crafted on a base development capacity, and then we allow incentives to go up. We have been using the technique of the incentives since the master plan was created as a way to achieve certain objectives depending on what is the condition of the city, what is the desire of the city at the time. So what we did in the past was like we were transferring development capacity from historic structures to new areas where we designated additional height and intensity was appropriate. And this is important because it is not everywhere in the downtown. It's through a very careful study of the downtown, it has been determined there are certain areas in the core, the majority are, that where more intense development, higher buildings, and more development capacity is appropriate. So there's a specific map that shows exactly what is the base for the certain district, and then what is the additional development capacity that can be achieved, and how that development capacity is what is changing a little bit. Previously, the development capacity, as I mentioned, could be achieved just through the transfer of development rights. So the developer will buy square footage from a historic structure somewhere else in the downtown that we desire to preserve. We didn't want St. Anne's to be built, right? To be turned down and built. So we allow St. Anne's to sell their unused development capacity and transfer that to other locations where additional height and intensity was appropriate. We went through that process for the last 15 years or 15 or 20 years, and it has been very successful. The majority of the buildings in the downtown area that were identified as historic buildings or that have a potential for designation or have a value for the city have been actually designated and protected. So we have St. Anne's, we have the historic churches in the Northwest neighborhood, we have the Christ Science Church, and other minor structures, the 500 block of Clematis, there's the Presbyterian Church. All those structures have been protected because they sold their development capacity and they are now designated as historic structures. Where we don't have that many more historic buildings in the downtown that can be protected. But we still would like to provide additional development capacity in certain areas. So we'd have come up with the idea of creating kind of a similar example of a similar type of development rights of the transfer of the historic rights, but we're calling it city development rights. So we are basically selling the development capacity to those properties that are interested in increasing their development above the base allowed. And that money that is collected, it will be used basically for two objectives. That's the proposal. We are saying the money that is collected, and we are proposing starting that square footage will be the same as the TDRs that previously they pay $17 per square foot. The city-owned TDRs or city development rights will be also $17. And it will be, the money collected will be reinvested on mobility improvements. 75% mobility improvements and then 25% for maintenance of public spaces. Why these two goals? Because the more intensity that you bring, the more you need to provide mobility options for people to be able to move downtown. So that's one of the main goals of the downtown, to be able to provide alternative modes of transportation for people so we can move everybody. The more people that we have the downtown, we have to branch out. We cannot keep everybody on single occupancy vehicles because we're not going to be able to get downtown. So we need to be able to provide options for people to take their scooter, maybe take a bus system, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, of what are the alternatives that the city is creating. There is one exception, that is the Flagler Waterfront District, where if the City Commission approves the additional height along Flagler, we are proposing the payment of that additional height goes to a park conservation district, and that will go basically to maintain the park, the waterfront park, that need additional resources. So that's the only exception. The rest of the incentives will be going to mobility improvements and maintenance of the public spaces. In addition to that, we have, as we have right now, any project that is residential and is proposing to use the incentive is required to set aside 20% of the additional square footage for workforce housing. We are maintaining that program. We are just adjusting a little bit the income levels where those units have to be provided. The current regulation requires those units to be between 60 and 100%. We are proposing to expand that a little bit and include units between 60 and 120% of the area median income. The options of how to provide those are the same. They can provide the units on-site, or they can provide the units off-site. There's also an option for payment in lieu. One change that we are proposing is this requirement for affordable housing or workforce housing will be imposed not only to residential projects, but also to non-residential projects. So when an office building comes in downtown, they also will have to set aside that percentage. They most likely will not want to put the units on site, but they can pay in lieu and provide the funding to the city for the city to go ahead and build the affordable housing or the workforce housing units somewhere within the proximity of downtown or within the outside the downtown. The reason why we're doing that, because as I mentioned, mobility is one of the priorities, affordable housing is the second. When an office building comes in, new employment will come in, we need to have the ability to provide housing for all those new employments. And the affordable housing is one of the big challenges that we have. With the success of the downtown, what has happened is all the rents are increasing, all the prices are increasing, so people do not find where to live in proximity to the downtown, and they will have to drive. So we need to balance that pressure of development with providing the workforce housing. So this is the strategy that we are proposing. We're adjusting a little bit of the payment in lieu or the provisions. We are adjusting the off-site locations. Originally, or the current master plan allows the off-site locations only in the Jefferson terminal and the area just a little bit north of Palm Beach Lakes between Dixie and Flagler. We are expanding that to include the area from Palm Beach Lakes to Norwood, between Flagler and the FEC, and also including the area of Broadway from 25th all the way to 45th, which is a great area to have affordable and workforce housing. And with the strategy for transportation, it will be a very connected area. So, and this is the next discussion, the transportation. So with all this development, I know everybody is concerned about transportation. The goal is that, yes, we are bringing new people downtown. It's new intensity of development. The strategy is like the city has a goal to basically shift 25% of the trips generated by a project to alternative modes of transportation. So how are we suggesting to do that? The city is, and this is part of another study, another group of people working very intensely on the transportation part of it. It's not part of the downtown master plan, but I just wanted to mention so you know that we are also working on that. So the city is working on the new RIDE WPB transit system. They are already in negotiations with the contractor that will operate the system. It will create fixed routes that will basically connect the downtown with the area in the proximity of downtown. So we get those 5-mile radius trips. Instead of being done through a private single occupancy vehicle, they will be able to do it by a public transit. So it is, in the first year of operation, the route will provide a north-south route, and the second year of operation will add an east-west route. This figure on the left is the yellow is what we did with the pilot as a point-to-point connection. The green is the area of coverage that will have the new system. So this system is expected to start operation at the end of the summer this year. So we're hoping that will access. There's also, in addition to the fixed route, we will continue with the on-demand service that a lot of you have been used to. It will be servicing also east of I-95, but an expanded area east of I-95. In addition to that, the other thing that has happened that is already in place is the city last year adopted the mobility fee. This is a fee that was replaced the previously existing county roadway impact fee. What happens is over the years, since the county implemented the roadway impact fee, any developer or development project in the downtown area or in the city will pay the county the roadway impact fee, and those funds will go and be spent by the county in other projects, the majority of them not in the city, all out west, to construction of new roads out west. So now with the changes that the state did, the city was able to basically implement the mobility fee that replaces the roadway impact fee. So it's that the developers do not have to pay more, but they will pay the money to the city, and the city will take that money and use it for capital improvement projects related to transportation in the downtown area. So the first one that we are working on is the extension of Fern Street that will basically connect Fern Street across the CSX, where the Tri-Rail is, with Australian, and will allow another way of people to get downtown. We are already working on that project. It's already under design, and the process already started. We are already counting with the funds that have been already collected for the mobility fee for projects that have been approved in the downtown area since October last year when it was approved. So this is a big change because it's also a revenue source for the city to implement projects that will impact the quality of life of the residents that are in the downtown and the projects that are generating the impact. So I wanted to mention those two elements because they are important in relation to the proposed development capacity that is being discussed today. Again, not part of the downtown, is being handled by another consultant, another group, but working on that. In addition to that, and this is something that we are contemplated for the downtown, is a part of the regulations will include transportation demand management strategies. And these are basically strategies that are like tools that we are proposing for the developers to do to basically divert those trips from a single occupancy vehicle to alternative modes of transportation. These are strategies that are used throughout the country. We are right now working on which ones will be required for everybody, which ones will be required depending on what type of project you do or what type of impact in terms of traffic your project is generating. But simple things like providing in the lobby of the office buildings a screen that shows what is the schedule for the trains, what is the schedule for the buses, what is the, like that type of information will help people, entice people to use alternative modes of transportation. Providing parking for the scooters that are now so popular, right? When you see people bringing the scooters, they have to just drag them to their offices. But if we can provide some facilities, it will be more comfortable and the people will start to feel like more comfortable with that. So this is something that we are working on. So that is kind of the final part of our presentation. We are, as I say, we are finalizing the TDMs. We would like to hear the input from the board about all the presentation. We are also working on additional resiliency recommendations. And one item that I wanted to mention is the DMP. We have received a proposal from a property owner that would like to the city to expand the boundaries of the DMP and include the Jaguar dealership as part of the DMP. So we received that as a request. They submitted an application. We are currently analyzing that proposal and determining what could be the development capacity that is assigned to that parcel in comparison with what they have right now. So if we move ahead with that, that expansion will be presented to you concurrently as part of the DMP. So a lot going on. Thank you for your patience. So we'd like at this point to hear some comments from the board and then afterwards from the public. I wanted to mention also what is the adoption process that we are following. So we have, this is the work session between the DAC and the planning board. We wanted to give you the opportunity to absorb all this information before it comes back to you for a public hearing and approval. So we are scheduled to go to the Downtown Action Committee on May 13, and then the planning board on May 19, with the zoning and land development regulations. That is what Bernard mentioned or discussed throughout the presentation. Then in June, we will come back to you with the proposal for the comprehensive plan amendment that basically will translate the zoning regulations into the big picture goals. It will include the big picture goals that were presented today. And then after that, we will go, the target date to go to the City Commission for approval will be July 6th, where we're gonna present the zoning and land development regulations and the comprehensive plan changes at the same time to the City Commission. After that, we will have to send it to the staff for review, and the second reading will happen around the end of September. So this is our proposed schedule. If everything goes perfect, this is where we're going. So we are now ready to hear your comments.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your patience.
Okay, great. Anna Maria, thank you. Very thorough, very much appreciated. And Bernard, thank you for your vision and the explanation of all of your. Is this on?
You might have to put it right to your microphone.
Okay, anyways, I was just thanking thanking Anna Marie and staff for their cooperation and collaboration with the Ziskovich team. Bernard, thank you for your detailed explanation and your vision for the next phases here for West Palm Beach. Very exciting. So how much time do you want to, Anna Maria, allocate for our questions from the board members to you, and then leave some time for the public comment?
I think we can start.
Yeah.
It's 6:20, so we have still
Till
40
7.
minutes.
Okay, good. Why don't we just go around, whoever wants to start. Jason, any questions, comments?
I am the newest member. I'm going to
Okay,
defer to
Patrick.
someone a little more tenured before I have my questions.
Thank you. Well, it was a very exciting presentation. There's a lot to like here, and I appreciate the thoroughness. I think, some of the things that in the last few years the city has, exercised smaller versions of this in various overlay districts in other parts of the city, and there sometimes can create a problem with setting these larger scale metrics, and that then they don't hold water below a certain parcel size. Obviously there's the real functionalities of the building that come into play. Keep in mind, like the 15-foot active use liner, the 24-foot drive aisle for a double parking structure. There are certain realities that when you assemble these on particular parcels in the city, that it becomes impossible to execute sort of the letter of these rules, because it becomes unfeasible. So I guess my question and comment would be, to what extent is the city planning to incorporate flexibility into, not to use the term variance, but flexibility in the interpretation of these rules, so that on smaller parcels where it's more challenging to achieve, can we still meet the intent of the code, without just creating parcels that really nothing can be done to. That was, I think, the active use, as I think, comes about in a lot of our conversations and presentations, applications over and over again. And, that 80% number, while it's, I think, a tremendous target, again, where the active use is deployed relative to the street grid is a critical component to all of this. There are certain street frontages that don't really contribute much to the public realm. When you take into context, adjacent context that is grandfathered and perhaps might not ever be changing, and then also still accommodate the basic functionalities of the building. So I think, I would encourage staff to look more carefully at those components to make sure that, is the 15-foot active use, is that truly workable? Should it be greater to allow for, you can actually fit real units, the depth of an actual residential unit within that envelope boundary. So those are some general questions that I would pose.
Thanks, Patrick. Sam, you got it? Sure.
Can I answer that?
Please,
Do you
yeah,
want
why don't
us
you
to
go ahead and
answer?
respond? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Why don't we do them one by one?
So,
That'd be great.
very, very good point. I think you are in the board, so we hear those variances all the time. I think the Ziskovich team has tested a lot and been sure that the FAR that is assigned is, for example, doable on the parcels, assign different FARs depending on the parcel size. The goals regarding active use and the depth, like there are certain things that we want to achieve. of course, we cannot project every little site in the downtown. So I think that is where the variances come into place. Do you have a hardship because the site configurations do not allow you to put that as liner as it is on the length that is required? And I think despite we don't like to go for variances. I mean, I know the developers don't like that because there's a certain uncertainty on it. Is the best way to control it because the regulation is the goal, right? That's what we want. But then there are circumstances where you are not allowed. They're not achievable. So you can make your case. In other cases, like the liner use, is the 15% is the minimum. So you can definitely do the 25 that you need to put the corridor and the unit, but the 15%, the 15 feet in depth is kind of the minimum. Depending of the use, you can achieve it or not. They're just different conditions. I don't know, Bernard, if you have anything else to add.
No, I mean, I think that the existing code and the process works. The hardest thing in doing this kind of approach is what happens if you have a tiny lot and you don't have room for parking and you want to renovate. And, I think that that's, a different issue. If somebody has a very small project, we haven't really looked at that. But, maybe if you want to build something that has 2 or 3 units, you get some variance, like Anna Maria was saying. So the idea of the code update is to deal with the majority, if not almost all of the issues. And the exceptions need to have an exception. So there's a process for that.
Sure. I guess just my follow-up to that would be, contrary to the North Flagler overlay, where variances essentially were eliminated, we would not be following that same strategy here.
No, we have the same thing that we have right now. The only ones that we are not, we're saying they're allowed, but only a 5% is like the front setback. So the ground floor setback, we want to really be very strict at that. You can ask for variances for the active uses. You can ask for variances for the liners, depth. I think there's another one for the building footprint that is not allowed. So we have a couple that we're trying to hold the line, but the majority you can ask for variance for.
All right. Okay, Sam.
So thank you for the presentation. It was it's definitely pretty comprehensive, and takes into account a lot of things. I love that you talked about change in trends and technology and how that should play into a lot of the ways that you think about the master plan. And I think that should really be looked at in a pretty intensive way, because something as simple as the way people get around with autonomous vehicles, or even stuff with Uber, where not everybody's driving their own car, will make a huge difference if you can eliminate the need for so much parking in a city that's not as, West Palm's not a huge city. So to get rid of parking would open up a lot of opportunities for whether it's green space or more, active spaces. So I think looking at that, comes to all sorts of, the parts of the building, whether it's, the infrastructure, whether it's materials and infrastructure and all those sorts of things. And just to leave enough flexibility for those sorts of changes and trends, and certainly flexibility when it comes to organically growing districts. I mean, there's lots of places in the city that were specifically directed in terms of the development plan, and there's some that just, happen to develop organically from a bunch of property owners getting together to develop a certain type of business arrangement, or even a master developer. So I think those are the sorts of things that there needs to be enough flexibility to allow for that without kind of stifling that organic growth. Something I've always paid attention to, the fees that are always collected with related to the affordable housing, providing for payment in lieu and stuff like that for the affordable housing, to make sure that also matches up with incentives that are given for, and there's a lot of people who do a lot of smaller projects that might be either beautifying the streets or beautifying certain areas, to make sure that if you're collecting fees on one end, that it's being matched up with giving incentives, or whether it's tax incentives or simply updating incentives to things like that, so that's more balanced and not just collecting collecting fees and then, not having it be allocated elsewhere. But otherwise, I think it's great to be thinking about things in such a large way.
Very good. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I only have two issues. One deals with the surface parking and the other one deals with the building height. I'll do the surface parking one. It's easy. Supposedly, this will get approved in the fall. And according to the new regulations, all the surface parking has got a 3-year lifetime. What happens when all the surface parking disappears in 4 years from now?
I'm not aware of a
No,
three-year
I'm
lifetime.
not sure which, maybe you are reading the section for the Northwest neighborhood?
This is from the document. It says the limitation of surface parking. Lots with frontages on a primary street are only allowed for a period of 36 months.
Yeah, that's probably the temporary. The TOD. So we have provisions in certain districts like the TOD
You
for
have to clarify that.
temporary surface parking lots.
Yeah.
The intention is to discourage that. If they do it, it's because they're suggesting it's a temporary use and they should remove them after the 3 years.
Yeah, so in other words, 4 years from now, we won't have any surface parking.
Well,
The other question I had was about height.
Let's explain that.
temporary.
If I have a project that occupies an entire block and it's under construction, sometimes people want temporary uses in an adjacent
Oh, so you're
block.
talking about a temporary parking.
Temporary
Well,
parking.
I don't think it says that
Temporary
on your
parking
text.
would last for 3 years, but not more.
Okay.
That's the intent.
Building height, the building footprint is getting smaller and smaller. It's like a little bag of jelly. As you start to squeeze a little bag of jelly, it can only go in one direction, which is up. The height limitations that you were proposing of 20 or 25 stories, it's just a guideline, or is this a cap?
It's a max.
It's a max. What happens on a site where you can't utilize the full FAR because of those restrictions?
I'm so glad you asked that. Because I can't tell you how many, it's got to be thousands of man hours. See, one of the things about the way we do this is we're architects. So every single proposal, not every block in the city, but every single proposal has been actually laid out to see if we can fit the FAR within the envelope that we're doing. So the point is, and I think it's really important, and Anna Maria explained it in terms of what we created 15 years ago, whatever it was. So you have a box, an invisible box, but you can never fill that box with building.
Right.
That's our fundamental belief system. So we don't want form. We're not looking for a continuous wall of buildings that goes up a certain height and then changes. We're looking for flexibility. So if I want to do a project that, let's call it affordable housing, where I don't want to go to 25 stories because it's too expensive, I could have more area occupied horizontally, but because I have a maximum floor area, I will not fill the height.
Mhm.
On the other hand, if I want to do Class A office or luxury housing, I might want the height, but then I can never fill the horizontal box. So that is basically how we set it up. So the intent is I will be able to get to my maximum floor area allowance. I'm limited to my height, but I can get there if I'm willing to squeeze my bag of jelly. So you have the flexibility, and that's the whole way the downtown looks now, because people have made different decisions. That's been working really well. So that's why we were saying, just to repeat myself one more time, when we start getting to these bigger blocks in the transit-oriented zone, and we want to start breaking down the length of the block, we've still tested all of those to make sure that we can get all the allowable floor area, and you can go up to the maximum height, but you're not going to be able to do the maximum horizontal build out and the maximum height. You're going to have to choose how you do it.
So you base it on the FAR. What about incentives?
We've tested the incentives against the additional FAR. So you're not going to go to 25 stories unless you pretty much buy the incentives. And then if you want that, you're going to have a thinner tower. We've tested all of it. So to the best of our knowledge, everything here has already been studied in terms of meeting the parking requirement, meeting the setback, meeting the maximum FAR. And, you know, there may be some anomalies, but even recently we realized we had an error that we were allowing too much height for an FAR in a particular zone, and we didn't want that to carry on. So we've been adjusting even as recently as like 2 or 3 weeks ago to make sure that there's a balance between how much you can build, how high you can build, and that you can meet your development objective, but not exactly how. That's up to you. And it will depend a lot on the building type that you want. So if you want moderate housing, you're probably not going to want to spend the money to go to 25 stories.
No, I was thinking more commercial office, particularly.
Same with commercial. Yeah. We tested it with commercial. We've tested it with residential. We feel pretty confident that this new iteration works a lot like the old iteration, and that's why we've been tweaking it so much.
Yeah. One final one. I mean, the concern I have, of course, is 5 years, 10 years from now, somebody wants to build a very tall building, exceeding the FAR and all of those other issues, and to give more character to the downtown instead of being a very horizontal line, a horizon. You know, think about New York City, what it'd be without the Empire State Building or the Chrysler Building. Is there room in downtown West Palm Beach for something like that?
Well, based on the recommendations we're making, no.
No.
But that doesn't mean it's not going to change again in 10 years.
Okay.
This is not written in stone. We did it last time, and now we're changing a lot of it. So as the city keeps growing and evolving, this is a living document. This is just the latest recommendation.
Okay. Jason, you got a question?
Thank you. Hi. Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. That was amazing. Thanks for taking the time to make that happen, to come out here. I have 2 questions, and the first question is about the city development rights. So the question sort of centers around the idea of what you were just saying, like filling the box. If we were to theoretically fill it as much as we possibly could, do we have some sort of an understanding as to the amount of revenue that would generate in terms of the city for future mobility improvements?
No, we have not done that exercise. I mean, like, not everything will be developed at the same time, so it will take years to even achieve every site that we have with the development capacity that is absorbed. There are also sites right now that are eligible for incentives right now that will continue to be eligible for incentives, and those property owners already acquired the TDR. So that doesn't mean like every project that will come in now will necessarily pay for the city development rights, because they may already have transfer of development rights in place. So we haven't done those numbers.
Understood. I'm trying to sort of gauge the metric. I understand that the window is enormous as well, but I guess the consideration is like, is this potentially going to generate over 25 years, $1 billion or $15 million is kind of where I'm trying to figure that out, I guess.
Like 5 million square feet of development. Like,
yeah.
Thank you.
5 million square feet of development in incentives times 7.
I understand that it's not going to be answered at this time, probably. I'm just trying to understand the scope of that and how those funds could possibly be used to develop future projects for mobility. The second question that I had was centered around the workforce housing offsite locations. Is there a way that we can earmark the funds from those offsite location, again, centered around mobility infrastructure, because we're moving affordable housing or workforce housing further away from where they're working now? Is there a way that we can possibly prioritize mobility infrastructure for individuals who are taking advantage of those incentives?
I'm not sure I understand. The funds that will be collected from the city development rights will be dedicated to mobility. So you want earmark those ones?
in the instance that somebody is using or taking advantage of that incentive and they're going to be building off-site workforce housing in an area further away from the place probably that those individuals are going to be working, is there a way that the funds that are going to be generated for mobility infrastructure can be dedicated specifically towards bringing those individuals that are going to be moved further away from the place closer back to where they're working?
The proposal is that the funds collected will be used for the city to run the right WPB transportation system. So
Okay.
that system will be set up, and the funds collected, whenever they're collected, will support that. See, if we collect more money, we could expand the service. If we collect that much, not that much, we'll find another source of revenue, or we just keep the proposal as it is.
So then the follow-up question is, does Ride West Palm Beach then encompass the area that we expanded for off-site housing?
Yes.
It does?
Yes.
Wonderful. The last thing that I wanted to mention was just simply a priority, which is that the number one priority was protecting the culture and the history of the area. Is there a way that we can possibly craft some of this new zoning legislature to factor in small business? What I'm seeing here as the city is transforming over the years now is that small business is becoming big business, even though it is still considered a small business. We're bringing in so many larger companies to operate, and they're still operating within like the what is the definition of small business? Like less than $150 million in revenue or something like that. You know, that's not exactly protecting the culture and fiber of our neighborhoods. So is there a way that we could possibly just incentivize operators, developers to include more local business operators in their plans or projects?
Yeah, that's hard to do in zoning, but there's still, the active uses with the pedestrian environment does lend itself to smaller businesses. It doesn't lend themselves so much to the bigger box type of uses. So if you're talking about pedestrian scale, I think that'll happen organically. If you're talking about commercial enterprises, they would move more into an office complex than a ground level pedestrian. So, I mean, you raise a good point, but it's not a zoning.
It's private enterprise. Yeah, I totally
We
understand.
can't really.
The last thing sort of going off of that is that with the expansion of the waterfront, is there any possibility that like, I guess it would be like hawkers licenses for like waterfront operators could be considered in the future as part of the plan there for like vendors who wanted to sell things like they have in Miami or other?
Yeah, we are not, the design of the waterfront park is not part of this. We're not touching that, so that's not zoning. We are regulating private development zoning. So what happens on the waterfront park will be subject to a totally separate process.
Okay.
But that's a good idea.
Thank you.
So let me comment on that. So I think I neglected to mention that the waterfront district zoning has a 100-foot setback we're proposing from Flagler. So in other words, those buildings that will be built in the future have a huge amount of publicly accessible open space that's part of their development project. And the intent there is to allow for smaller, not hawkers per se, that's a different city issue, but we are imagining small food and beverage and other activities to activate the waterfront and give it a kind of nice low scale right next to where people are walking. So that's part of the plan, which is why we're looking at making sure the towers don't occupy all of the sky. They're going to be thinner, and it's going to be an extension, we hope, of the waterfront redevelopment of whatever it turns out to be, so that you end up with an amazing new waterfront over time that's fully active and occupies both sides of the street and could be very cool.
Yeah, it's going to be. I'm excited. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mike. You want to go?
Yep. Maybe something the last iteration did not address, and I don't see that this one is doing that either, is if we are going to be expanding the city even more, the traffic has gotten really bad downtown. And there's been no factoring in whatsoever that I've seen for loading zones or anything like that. Is there anything you can do with this plan that we can factor in loading zones or something to control this? If you drive down Oliver Dixie, the loading, the vans are just stopping right there and nothing's being done. It's getting impossible. And for some reason, the city has closed off Olive right before Clematis. I have no idea why they've done that. But is there anything in this master plan to factor in what to do with our roads, what to require certain areas for loading zones?
I mean, your answer is two things. I totally understand what you're talking about. The current master plan, the loading requirements are pulled from the general code. So, but we can look at the requirements for a specific development. What are the loading requirements for that one? So we can control that one and put something. What you're talking about is general loading areas on public streets. That is definitely not part of the downtown, but we can discuss it again with the engineer department to see what will be I mean, if they're working on that strategy. I know what you're talking about.
Then does there need to be something as far as if you're going to build something, some area has to be loading. You have to have some area of your building where you can't require the trucks to park on the street. They have to be able to get in and unload somewhere in this huge 25-story building.
New buildings have that,
Yeah.
but the problem is like the existing building.
So look, that's a great question, and we're facing this in other cities that we're working in. So the new buildings will have loading requirements that will be embedded in the zoning.
And that is going to be in this?
Yes, that will be in there.
Okay.
But you raise a point of older cities where the buildings were much smaller and they didn't have dedicated loading. And it's not really something that we're doing, but operationally, the best way that I've seen for cities that already exist that cannot magically create loading in every building is to control it with time. So you have hours where loading is allowed to happen. After those hours, there's enforcement that makes it a penalty to be stopping in the street and loading when you could have done it at a different time. And there needs to be a separate effort on how to manage that process. It's not part of our work right now, but I think that it's a really important issue because it will get worse as time goes
Right.
by and the city intensifies. So,
Please don't factor in enforcement
Sure.
as part of this because the city can't enforce it now. They're not going to be able to do it in the future.
well, you can enforce it if you make it a requirement of the city ordinance. It doesn't normally live in a zoning code. It would live in an ordinance.
No, I'm sure our ordinances don't allow parking in the streets of loading vans, but they're still doing it, and the city's not enforcing it. That's why it needs to be part of the buildings. They have to be able to pull in the building and
We have
unload.
that.
Great.
As far as new buildings,
Great.
it will
Love it.
be, you'll pull into the building off the street.
Now, you're talking about a 25% reduction in parking, and this is because you're thinking there's with all the mobility, people are going to be on scooters and bikes. What if that doesn't happen? What do you foresee then is going to be the result of now the fact that you've now got all these new buildings with 25% less parking and people aren't riding scooters? What's going to happen to all the cars?
Well, if there is increasing amounts of congestion, then it requires a different answer. So this other gentleman raised New York. I'm there a lot. They now have a congestion charge. That congestion charge has had an enormous impact on traffic in New York. I can tell you that when I used to go outside, it was a sea of cars. Those cars are a lot less. So each successive problem requires a new answer. Our belief is that in the future there will be, and it's proven out by the new generation of people. We always think about these things in the way that we've been operating in our lifetime. But I'm telling you that, you know, the new generation doesn't want to drive. I mean, I don't know if you have teenagers or, you know, the kids, they want their parents to drive them everywhere. I mean, when I was a kid, I was dying to get a driver's license. Nobody even cares about it anymore. They just say, can I just get an Uber? I need to go see my friend. It's a completely different world. So for us to, I mean, think of it like this, and this has really been impactful to me over the years. If you look at a parking space that's 18 by 20 and half of the drive aisle, you're looking, by the time you figure out the parking garage, you're looking at about 400 square feet per parking space. You're looking at a one-bedroom that's getting smaller and smaller at 600 square feet or 650. You're looking at studios that are 400 square feet, 450. And Miami's filled with micro units. 400's the maximum. So just process that for a second. Every single place that someone could live is equal to the square foot of one parking space. We got to make a change. We can't just keep going on that as we build this much residential building, we're going to build an equal amount of square feet of parking. It's not equal. I acknowledge there's more residential than parking, but over time the trend is less cars, less parking. We've got to, it's like an addiction. We've got to figure out how to change what we're doing. Now, I say that as an architect who has clients who are now asking me if I can help them figure out how to reduce the parking requirement of the city, because they don't want to increase the construction cost by millions of dollars to build more and more parking. When I started years ago, offices were 5 cars per 1,000 square feet. Now they're 2. Things are changing, and we're on the front of all that, and I think it would be wrong for us to be continuing with the same amount of parking. We have to assume there's going to be a change. And if there's no change, it'll stop development. I mean, you can only fit so many cars into the city before people don't want to live there anymore. It's a very big quality of life issue. I feel very strongly about the fact that we got to reduce the amount of parking that's required.
Lastly, as far as you had the passageway and the corridors, what it looked like on one of your examples, by doing that, it looked like there was one just building right on the edge of, I think it was Fern Street, just one big 25-story building. It seems like if you do that passageway and corridor, the trade-off is we're going to have these buildings all the way right at the edge of the street, going all the way up. We're not going to have that setback.
Well, you know, there will be streets where the tower is on the street. What we're trying to do is make sure we have enough syncopation in the pattern to allow for it. But the point is that every project that we work on, when we're the architects doing the tower, the first thing we're doing is we're looking for our views. So we're going to try and put our tower somewhere else, because we're not saying it has to be on the street. We're just saying 40% has to be open view corridor. So that tower could be in the middle. It doesn't have to be, that's where we tested it, but it doesn't mean that's where it's going to be. And I guarantee you, for the types of buildings that are going to be going up, you're not going to be getting cereal boxes. You're going to be getting architects with creativity. So don't misunderstand our kind of study tests
And
for
Vancouver's a
what would
great
be
city.
the end result.
Is that part of their code, or is that just how it wound up happening?
The code is simple. It says 40% of the frontage above the podium has to remain free of the tower. That doesn't mean it can't be 220s. It doesn't mean that you couldn't twist it. It doesn't mean it couldn't be a curve. Those things are still very possible, and I think likely. Everybody's going to be wanting to make something that's away from the tower next to them. That's just how it works.
I just wanted to add to what Bernard just answered. You gave the example of Fern, and remember when we were doing the presentation, when Bernard was doing the presentation, we mentioned that we want to maintain the character of certain streets, and Fern is one of them. So Fern, for example, will have a 140-foot setback from Zapodilla to Tamarind Avenue in order to maintain the adjacent neighborhood that is a much lower scale than the 25-story buildings that could go there. So keep in mind that a lot of these streets, like Clemati Street, that we want to maintain the historic character of that corridor, we are providing or requiring a 140-foot setback in order to maintain that character. So just not all of the streets are going to go all the way to 25 stories.
Thank you. Okay,
That's
great,
what
thanks.
she knows.
Yeah, hey, Anna Marie, in light of time, how much, you want a couple minutes?
would like to hear
Yeah,
from
let's
all the
do,
board
try and keep it 2 or 3 minutes for the rest, and then we can dedicate some time to all these fine folks that showed up tonight. All right, go ahead.
Yep. No, thank you very much. Yeah, I just wanted to keep my comments, I think, relative to maybe some tangible programs. The zoning is very tangible. You can see the boxes, you understand the shape. But to say you're going to have this development and then, the certain percentage goes to mobility programs or landscape maintenance under the CDRs, that's nebulous to me. I don't know what that is. I would love to see some kind of major, big program that makes West Palm Beach achieve the goal of that nationally recognized destination. Maybe it's a Emerald Lake project around Clear Lake. Maybe it's some other kind of thing. Or maybe it's the solution of the problem that we're facing, right? And that's growth. Growth is going like this. People are coming here. I don't know what the numbers are. If the population is going to grow up 25%, 25% of the people are not going to take the bus all of a sudden, right? It's not part of our culture. So I'm inviting everybody to think boldly and to think about some strategies and ideas that would solve the problem before it happens. And I don't know what those are, but I'm just thinking one idea. In West Palm Beach, we have a ridge. We are not underground New York City to make a subway system, but can there be a tube, a channel, a way to get from the south end to downtown underground and pop up and not have to drive a car, not have to get all these people over there? I don't know if that's possible. I'm not an engineer. I'm just throwing out there needs to be a lot bigger, bolder ideas on solving this transportation thing than kind of, getting the workers on a bus in a garage over here and busing them in. So with that, I'll turn it over to the next one. Thank you.
No, can I say something about that? Because now that I'm done presenting, I can just, not feel like I have to just be the FedEx guy that just puts out all this stuff. A particular peeve. Transportation is rejected when it's described as a bus, but it's accepted when it's a train. People get all over town now on scooters, and it annoys the hell out of pedestrians. People ride bicycles, but they feel threatened by traffic. So I think we live in a world of paradoxes because we feel like some transportation is acceptable and other transportation is not for me, it's for the housekeeper, right? So I think we have to kind of think about getting beyond that. The reason I mentioned New York is it required incredible courage to stand up to the federal government when they were trying to shut them down and say, we're going to have a congestion charge, because the only way to get people out of the car is to figure out a way to make them take the transportation system. So I think we, not you or me or West Palm, but I mean all of us in South Florida, we got to figure out a way to become more comfortable with transit, because one thing I really believe in is when you have a dedicated lane for transit, even if it's on rubber tires, and you're stuck in traffic like a parking lot, and you see this thing go by you at 40 miles an hour, if you could buy into that, you would start thinking, I'd rather do that than spend an hour in traffic. And the reason people don't do it is because of this perception that taking a bus is like a terrible thing. And I don't know how to answer it. I mean, I believe in design. I think if we could make cooler buses and make real stations where you could land in an air-conditioned environment, even if it's raining, and there's ways to get past this, but I'm just venting now for a second that it's a really big problem. But when the design community transportation planners, urban designers, everybody starts making recommendations, first thing you find is that's not for me. I want to be in my car. And that's where I think a big part of the problem is. Because putting in a dedicated lane in a bus rapid transit system is very cheap.
Okay, great. Did you have more, Kim?
Okay. Yes, I thank you for the great presentation. I actually have 5 comments, so you don't have to answer all of them now. Maybe just be ready for before the DAC meeting next time. On in May. The first one is to dovetail Mr. Jason Lackow comment about encouraging small businesses. Perhaps one way that zoning can help is with live-work zoning. Perhaps more, definitely along Clematis, Dixie, and perhaps all the primary streets. Right now, I see, I live very close to Clematis, and I see businesses open, close, and my heart breaks for them. They pull money from family and friends and open a coffee shop, and then 6 months, 12 months later close. So it's a lot of people's life savings there. So if you could make that live-work unit where they can have the retail, commercial on the ground floor, and they themselves or their employees or rent it out, something on the second and above floors, that would avoid 2 sets of mortgages, 2 sets of insurance, etc. It's very, very common in Asia and Europe. So live-work unit is number 1. Number 2 is the transit. The maximum height, 25 stories. I don't think we should we should have the same cap, 25, for several of these districts. For example, the TOD, transit-oriented, I would personally feel very comfortable going above that 25, but then for Flagler waterfront, I would like to less than that. I don't think they are the same. Well, they're not the same, so even with the setback and stair steps, yeah, so if you could please, review that and not treat all of them, give them the same cap. The next one is on the CDR, the city development rights. On the package that were given to us prior to the meeting, I did search for that, and I didn't see enough information on that. So if you could, have a lot more definition on how the formula is calculated, and then the accountability and control to make sure that future uses the funds collected from that will be used for the intended purposes. Just not at the city level, just for example, at the state level, fund under the Sadowski's fund were collected for affordable housing, and then for years they were borrowed but never repaid. So then now that part of the reasons why we have the affordability crisis that we have. So so on the CDR, if you make sure that the intended the original use of funds will stay and be accountable for.
Dedicated.
Yeah, dedicated and not be easily borrowed or some other funnel to other purposes. Okay, my next comment is on the Northwest Historic District. Limiting it to 2 and 3 stories, I feel that we might be harming the people that we think we're protecting by limiting the height to that, because with that kind of height and with today's skyrocketing construction costs and then future maintenance and operational things like insurance, with that height, nobody will come in and build for that area. So if you could maybe reconsider and raising the height and density. And lastly, on the referendum about the Flagler being superseded by state law, I understand is some state. I would recommend, like the lawyer in me, I was a corporate lawyer for over 15 years, so I feel like as part of the legal due process, if we don't already have an independent legal opinion from a law firm outside of the city attorney, perhaps just to be on the safe side, we want to get that kind of independent opinion just to prevent any future legal challenges that would waste people time and yeah. So that's my last comment.
Okay, thanks, Kim. Sam?
Yeah, is there any county participation in the TDRs, or the CDRs are totally replacing the TDRs?
Well, the TDR program still exists because there are still some structures that are in there, and there are some developers that have purchased TDRs. So you can still use the TDRs. The CDRs is when you don't have any option to buy any TDRs from a historic structure, you can buy them.
And the county doesn't participate at all
No.
in the CDRs?
No.
Okay. Thank you so much for the presentation. A lot of thoughtful discussion from the boards.
All right, thanks, Sam. Brian, you got anything?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Herculean effort. We know, you're rewriting like the Bible. But a couple things, kind of large scale and small scale. Large scale, I agree with what Sam Fish said. We're at a point right now where technology is going so fast that I think this code should remain open and flexible to autonomous vehicles. 2 days ago, the ULI put a presentation on, and they're talking about vertiports and autonomous vehicle hubs. And I agree. If you set up autonomous vehicle hubs in the downtown area, you're going to win the race in the 21st century because you're now going to be the stop for people coming to and from the downtown needed, and that technology is going to replace all the parking. So, and we can have the outer areas come in from the north and south, or especially from the west, with that kind of system to supplement everything else with, scooters. I don't know how far from Wellington we're going to go on a scooter, but at least the autonomous vehicle path is much more realistic, and it's happening now. Meisner down in Boca, and then obviously Miami. So that's kind of 20,000 foot, big project stuff. The small projects, though, that's where I just want to understand that this code's going to start to address some of the small lot issues, because we see at DAC a lot is variances and requests for help, because the small lots are the ones that need the most flexibility, number one. And number two, some of the older regulations for open space. We're now focusing on open space and expanding the open space and the pedestrian environment for all of our citizens and our walkers. Well, the old code has very rigid standards for what a plaza is and what a passageway is. It's ridiculous. That flexibility has to be built into it. Creative people come along and take a skinny space and make it fantastic. You don't have to have a 30-foot wide. Otherwise, that's old thinking. And I think the small lots need as much help as possible. And I hope your DMPU addresses some of that at that small lot level, because we have a lot of those left. There's a few big.
What's your opinion about the size of a small lot?
Well, the code now is less than 50,000 square feet. They have a certain sort of standard for less than 50,000 square feet, but that's a big lot.
Square feet is an acre.
It's a big lot. I'm talking.
That's why I'm asking, where do you see the biggest issues at DAC? What size? Is it a 50 by 140-foot lot?
It's the smaller lots lining historic streets. It's stuff like in Nora, where we have adaptive reuse, and we have areas that needed to be reconfigured, and it made sense to reconfigure because we're dealing with an older area. And they're never going to be high rises there. They're going to be redevelopments that are just going to roll over in time and be redeveloped. And I think refining that will help make for a better pedestrian environment, open space environment that you're trying to achieve here. So, 20,000 foot look and an on the ground look. I think you guys can get it done and make sure that those get addressed. Thanks.
Brian, you got some questions?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I had a question about the podium, that you had a max of 140 feet, and then it would be roughly, 14 stories? Where did you come up with,
That's the width.
That's not correct?
That's the tower, the setback for the tower.
Setback for the tower.
So in certain areas, the towers are allowed to go straight, like up to 15 stories, and then at that point they have to set back for the other 10 stories.
Sure. Now,
So I think the maximum podium height is
68.
it's around 65, 70 feet in there.
oh, okay. So in those instances, you were saying that it goes up to 140 in certain districts, right? Or in certain areas. Not the podium, but the tower.
The tower has to set back from the street level.
Yeah.
Street, not,
At the 15-story level.
yeah.
Okay.
Only for certain streets where we're trying to protect a lower scale at the street.
Okay.
So it's Clematis, Fern, and Dixie. We're saying we don't want to have height on those streets because of the character of those streets. So the only height you'll have is the podium.
The podium that's maxed at.
68, I think we arrived at, or somewhere in there.
So okay. Okay,
So
that
a
makes.
five, six-story building can't.
Okay.
It will not look higher than that.
Okay, good. So then it's
Tower
stepped
is
back.
pushed way back.
Yeah, I understand. Then that's stepped back. Okay, that makes sense. Now, okay, so that view corridor that you're going to have, you were mentioning you had a diagram with a view corridor. That view corridor is really accessible around 70 feet, right? So pedestrians not really going to get a view at that view corridor. It's only people at a podium level getting that view corridor.
View
right?
like this, but you will perceive the environment, this guy.
So but
Across the street, you'll see that building, you'll see sky, and then you'll see a tower. You're not going to see just tower.
yeah, you'll see a step back, right? And you'll see tower, but you'll still have, up to about 7 stories, right?
Yeah.
So that's still
5 stories.
5 stories. Okay.
Maximum.
And there's no place that are actually 140 feet, right? I saw a diagram where it showed 140, but that was the tower.
Yeah.
Can you show me that again? Is that
Darius,
possible?
why don't you explain the drawing?
Because it looked confusing when I first saw it.
So this is the one that you're mentioning, that you're
Yes.
talking about? So yes, this is what Ana Maria is explaining. Above the 15th level, the 15th floor, then the tower needs to step back. So your building can come up all the way up to 15 stories from the frontage of the street, fronting the street. But then after you get to the 15th story, you need to set it back.
But where does that occur?
On Fern Street between Zapodilla and Tamarind, on Clematis between Zapodilla and Tamarind, and then also on Dixie Highway all the way through.
Well, why can't you break that 140, like 70, and then step back another 70, and then you're a tower?
So when we did the analysis, right next to this block, it's the Cultural Arts District, and the maximum height there will be, with incentive, will be 12 stories. So when we were doing our analysis and the view, kind of like the angle, the street section and angle, that's the number that gave us that gave us so that when you're walking on the street, that's how you will perceive the two buildings the same. So that you won't see the building, the 25-story building, from 140 feet from the street.
But if you want to set back your tower below the 15 stories, you can do it.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
It's just options.
The box you cannot fill.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. All right, Brian, thanks.
Okay, I think that's it.
I'm going to have
Thank
just
you.
one quick
Appreciate
question, Anna Marie, and then I'll probably do more at the next meeting. But Bernard, thank you. I think you kind of hit it. Bernard, we said we had the spark a while back, and now we're kind of getting built out to a grand scale. It's exciting, but it's also daunting in terms of the rapid growth here. Anna Marie, where do we stand with that TCEA program, Transportation Concurrency? Does that still exist?
Transit Concurrency Exception Area. Does not. Because that is a good question. I didn't talk about that, but one of the reasons why the city had the transfer of development rights is because we were restricted for the overall development capacity of the downtown by the TCA, the Transportation Concurrency Exception Area. It goes away. Once the city adopted the mobility fee, we're not bounded by the county provisions for the transit and mobility and transportation issues. So it is, that goes away. That's why we can create the city development rights, and we can increase the way we are doing. Okay. That doesn't mean, again, that we are free for all, right? We have to still control the development and tie it with the mobility. If we don't do the two things, we're not going to be able to function.
Okay, well, I think that's going to be key, is to keep that balance with the residential, the commercial, the communication. And this, I think all the details look great. The architectural components, we can go over more details later at the other meeting, but sort of the big picture, the biggest thing I see the change here is the mass along Flagler. We always were like 5 stories, then we had incentives to 8 stories, maybe 10. We had the little pocket change there for the one Flagler on the, the heavy boulevard of Lake and Lucerne. So maybe just comment briefly about, I know the history of the referendum with the city, and just sort of address that, which I see as the biggest change in this update. And the justification, I understand the architecture and the interesting ability or opportunity for great architecture on that boulevard, but I just want to hear a little bit more about that.
Well, it's a great question, and it comes from an idea that, as I mentioned in the very beginning, that zoning is based on vision. So what happens if the vision is not realized, is maybe the question you're really asking, is if we don't end up with a great waterfront, is there a reason to have that height? So our thinking was, great cities end up with amazing skylines and places that are very special and heavily used, heavily invested in. So our thinking was, if we have this kind of golden nugget right there at the center of the city, right there at the edge of the Intracoastal, if we can create a vision that looks at an amazing green space and then all the new buildings an additional 100 feet back, and this dotted area of active uses that could become just like a fabulous incentivized public asset where you could go there and have anything day or night that you might enjoy, that we could actually create that by the way that we do the projects. The value of the property, I believe, is the highest value of any property because it's sitting in the best possible location. So just basic land use logic is, if we allow for more intensity and height, but we control over development of it, and we mandate public access and public use, and the money that goes into buying the incentive funds the conservancy that we're hoping the city sets up for the continued maintenance and development of the park, you're like on Fifth Avenue in front of Central Park. I mean, what better place would we put the height than there? Because that's going to be the iconic image of the city 20 years from now. So that's why I'm saying it's linked. And I know a lot of people in the room came to talk about the waterfront, but what you're looking at today is not law, it's recommendations. Our recommendation is we take the most valuable part of the city and we make it the most iconic, most valuable part of the city. So for us, that means let the height go up, let's keep things thin, let's make as much green space as we can, because we're asking developers to give up 100 feet of their frontage. And we want that because we want that to be publicly available. So that's our logic, but it's linked to the vision. If that's not the desired vision, then that zoning may not be the right zoning. And maybe what we do is we let people build closer to the street. We're not going to really get a new and renewed park system. We're not going to have the conservancy. We're not going to have this iconic front yard. Well, at that point in time, maybe it's not 25 stories. Maybe it's less. We're not resisting that as a concept. We're saying, in order to create zoning, like I said in my foolish analogy right up front, I have the ingredients. I got to figure out what I want to make. If I want to make something amazing, then the zoning should support the fact that somebody's going to want to make something amazing out of it. And I think that's I mean, I can't think of another way to describe it, because in a certain sense, it is arbitrary. Before we had law that prevented it, when we did the code last time, we didn't touch Flagler. We had no opinion because there was nothing to talk about. But now that it's open and we're looking at, how the city has evolved into such a beautiful, amazing, pedestrian-friendly place, why wouldn't we, our thinking is, why wouldn't we want our front yard to be the most amazing front yard you could ever have? And why wouldn't we want to build in the incentives to fund it and keep it going? It's like, I don't know if you've been, again, New York comes to mind, if you've been to the High Line. How many people have been to the High Line? Well, who would ever think that a defunct rail yard that used to bring raw beef into the city to be butchered and distributed would become the most desired touristic public space? Every time I'm there, the whole city is out on this thing. The buildings that have come up next to it are amazing and very beautiful and desirable. So where are we? Are we going to put it in the TOD? I don't think so. Are we going to put it into the historic center? No. It belongs right on the waterfront. So, I mean, I'm not making a plea so much as I'm trying to explain that if we're sitting on the gem, we should make a beautiful jewel out of it. And, that's our thinking. But I think your point is really important. If the city is not going to do that, if that is not the vision that's desirable, then we should rethink the waterfront edge.
Yeah.
Because if we're going to push it down, we're going to end up with wall-to-wall buildings, and the only valuable view is the very front edge of the building. We're going to end up with a completely different kind of built environment. We're going to have a lot of garage and a lot of liners and a lot less height. And kind of a wall-to-wall of stubbier buildings.
That's great. All right, perfect. Maybe Anna Maria, maybe the next time it'd be interesting to see some graphics of the whole Flagler facade streetscape. As by right now versus as proposed. I think that could be very beneficial to us all. All right, so this has been fantastic, fascinating. Thank you, Bernard, Anna Maria. Why don't we open up to questions?
Yes, I would like to open it to the public. Thank you for
list?
your patience. So can you help me with the mics? I'm just going to go over the names that we have in here. Just please limit your comments. We are past our time already. Lynn Iray. Lynn? Okay.
I know we're not talking about the, what do you call it? The, what's the big thing? Oh, yeah, the waterfront. Okay. The green space. Okay, we have a lot of green space. We have the entire, at the end of Clematis, we have, and I'm not against green space, but everybody keeps talking about activating the waterfront, activate the waterfront. Well, it seems to me that if we're interested in that, why are we allowing the thought of, just like when I'm walking down on the waterfront, E.R. Bradley's. It's a historical building. It's been here forever. People love it. They have free things for people to do. They have ping pong games. You walk on there. You don't even have to pay to use any of that stuff. That place is historical, and they're getting lots of pressure from a certain corporation to they just, sell it, and they're fighting that. And we have that. That's the one spot. You walk down there, and what's the bright light in the night? You walk down, it's lit up. These wonderful groups, small groups, are playing musical instruments. You sit down anywhere. You can sit out there. You don't have to even pay anything to sit there. And I just think that's so important. That's like a historical building that somebody's just going to crash it down. So anyway, that's what I've been sitting here thinking about over and over again, is there's one thing to have green space, and what's going to happen with that green space? I mean, I love the way it is there. The trees, you walk along the meandering walkway. There's just so much to see. And then all of a sudden, we're going to look over and see green space. Well, who's going to be in the green space? Is it going to be a dog park? I mean, what's it going to be? I don't know what's going to happen. But the amphitheater, a lot of the people take their dogs there. I think that's fine. It's a perfect spot. but let's allow us to just keep what we have that's good. That's what I would think. And I could say a lot more, but I'll stop.
We have Michael Butler.
Good evening. Michael Butler, 610 Clematis Street. I am a downtowner. There's a lot of things I could say about the presentation, but you have members on the board here who are lawyers and business people and architects and people in the construction industry that are very interested in all of this. For maybe the rest of us, you throw so much at us, it's very difficult to digest everything at one time. Just, I would think, have a smaller meeting to clearly explain it to the people who live here and who work here. And just on another issue, just bring it up, like he talked about the 16-foot sidewalks. I mean, that's a lovely idea. Go from Clematis Street down Rosemary to City Place on a Friday night. And don't ask me about 16 feet because there isn't 16 feet. They got 6 people directing traffic on Clematis and Hibiscus, and they can't get the cars through and they can't get the people through. Ross built 3 buildings, 4 buildings, and this is what happened. What's going to happen next? The city is overcrowded. In my opinion, the city is overcrowded now. Like you talk about opening up Fern Street. Oh, it's great. People can get out of Fern Street onto Australia Avenue and go home. Turn that around. They have to come in Fern Street and go into the city. What happens when they cross the railroad track? Fern Street is 2 lanes wide. There's no room. What are you going to do? Condemn all the buildings along Fern Street to open it up? To what end? Talk about affordable housing. You have these programs for affordable housing. This has always been a problem for me. Affordable housing. Oh yeah, I'm going to build, so I'll put affordable housing, but I'll put it 4 miles from here. Or I'll pay you so I don't have to do affordable housing. So the people who service us, the policemen, the firemen, the postmen, the people the dry cleaner, whatever you want, they got to live out of town, then take transportation in town. How is that helping them, and how is helping anybody's quality of life on that? It doesn't work, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Gigi Thailander? Gigi? She left. No, she's here. Yes.
She's in the back.
Hi, thank you. I live at 701 South Olive, right next to the 601 building, and we have 430 some odd residents. With 1 day's notice, we had 15 people here today because of a gross misunderstanding of what is going to be allowed along Olive, particularly the Holy Trinity site. In the past, the people who bought at 701 South Olive believed, and the management understood it to be limited to a 4 to 5 foot new building on the site. And I've seen in the records, I did a record retrieval, and I see that they submitted for a 28-story building, and that the consultant said, oh no, 23. Well, neither of those are acceptable. And this was 1 day notice. We had 15 people here. You give us a little more time, we're going to fill the room.
That's why we're all here. We didn't know about this. The church lied to us till yesterday we found out.
Ma'am, we...
This is accurate. Do you have information that this is actually going to happen, or is this
Well,
just something?
the proposal to increase the height on the waterfront includes the Trinity Church. The Trinity Church will stay with a new building, yes. So the Trinity Church is proposed to stay, and a building behind it will be built. If they build it, if the proposal is 25 stories, yes. So it will be applicable to them. I'm calling people on here, so just wait, please. But we are hearing you.
Affordable housing, 5 floors. That's what they told the neighborhood. That's why our management sent a letter. I have a copy here. All of a sudden, yesterday we found out there's no affordable housing. They're building a high-rise, and the 5th floor are garage. Is that right or fair by
We don't have, we don't have an application submitted for that site, so we're talking about the general regulation. Okay. So,
Okay, we're going to just go to the next card
yes,
here, Anna
the
Maria.
next one is Greg Wise.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the presentation. I thought, for the most part, pretty good. But here's some things. Trips. We shouldn't be counting trips. We should be counting vehicle miles traveled. Not all trips are the same. A 1 mile trip, a 10-mile trip, and a 20-mile trip are all very different, and we count them the same. And we shouldn't be measuring as it relates to our traffic that way. For pedestrians, if we want pedestrians and we want a pedestrian-friendly environment, we've got to have shade. That means we need to have awnings on buildings, and the awnings need to extend to the entire sidewalk. You walk down Clematis today, some areas have awnings, some don't, but you're dodging in and out of the rain in the summertime. And then when it does rain, it pours right down the middle of the sidewalk because they only extend part way. They don't go all the way to the street. So we need to fix that. Increasing the open space. You guys, we have a lot of little lots the city owns, CRA owns downtown. They should be pocket parks. There's no reason for them to sit as vacant lots, or they need to be pocket parks. We don't need just big green spaces. We need small green spaces. Michael Bax was 100% right. Delivery vehicles, and I will tell you, you are incorrect. New buildings have been built in this city with no space for delivery. You go right across the street here. There is no place for them to unload and load new tenants coming into that apartment building across the street. And that building is what, 2 or 3 years old? And you now see parking vans parking in the middle of the street, blocking Banyan. So we need to fix that. And that can be done with our zoning code. It needs to be a requirement that they have a place for that. And the world has changed, right? We get delivery vehicles from Amazon. Let's see. TDRs. So one of the things I'm concerned with is we have spots up on the north end of Flagler Drive, places like the Sailing Club and the Flotilla Club. We'll lose those places potentially, but they have an opportunity if we allowed them to sell their TDRs to the downtown. That would benefit them so that they could continue to operate, and it would help. With TDRs downtown. So I think you need to think about beyond just the downtown and where you might be able to acquire TDRs from. Let's see. On the traffic, I think one of the things that's we haven't done a traffic analysis. What does this all mean? I mean, and you talk about, well, we don't know, it's not all going to be built at once, but we can measure how much density we're allowing, and we can calculate what that traffic impact would be. That needs to happen. That needs to be a part of this plan, because we don't know what the impact is going to be. We're saying we're gonna reduce 25% on transit, and that'd be excellent if we can do it. So we can put that in the model, and let's see what happens. But to do this without understanding the real impact, I think we're missing it. And then one last thing, and I'm going to put on my county commissioner hat. Talking about traffic impact fees, and that is that it's true, they do come out of downtown, but they are applied to a zone adjacent to downtown. They don't go everywhere in the county. And let's also understand that when you build an office building downtown, not everybody lives downtown. They come from somewhere else. And we have to build roads for those people to get in here. And that's the real issue with downtown traffic. It's not moving around downtown once you're here. It's getting into downtown. It's a dead end we are trying to all jam into at the same time. And so that's the issue we need to be solving for.
Thank you. Phyllis and Michael Rubinstein.
Hi, I'm Phyllis Rubenstein, and I live at 701 South Olive. I'm concerned, when I first moved here 18 years ago, there was a height limit on the downtown area. What has happened? Behind me, I see banyan tree going up. It's going to be 28 stories. That's on Fern. As I listened to your discussion, I thought Fern was supposed to be a low building, a 15-story. That's going to be 28 stories. Then next door to it, our friends from Related took over the Russo's sub shop and the printing press, and they're building a giant high-rise. And now I hear the church, which we were lied to at a meeting in my two-city plaza, that the church was only going to be 4 stories for educational purposes. Now I understand it's going to be a high-rise 30 feet high. And I'm going to go a little off the cuff here. You're talking about mobility. The reason I moved to West Palm Beach, I'm 77 years old. I wanted to walk. I didn't want to drive. I walk every day to the gym on Clematis. I walk around town. I walk to Palm Beach. Palm Beach has eliminated the use of e-bikes, all the motorized things. Here, you could get run down by the e-bikes, the scooters, the whatever, walking. And I spoke to you once at a meeting, Anne Marie, and you said you were working on it. The city was working on it. Have you done anything about it?
On limiting this use of the scooters?
Yes, the state approved a plan. Palm Beach has approved a plan. Where I go up north, Ocean City, New Jersey, they're not allowed on the sidewalks.
Well, I don't think the city has approved that, but we are trying to build new bike facilities so the scooters can ride their scooters on the bike lane and not on the sidewalk. So that's one of the things that we are trying to do.
Well, how is Palm Beach allowed this and we can't allow it?
We will raise the concern.
Well, I raised it to you back when, and you said you were working on it.
We're still working on it.
It's never gone. That was quite a while ago. Thank you.
Nancy Gregory.
Well, I may start crying because I'm 85 years old, and just a few days ago, I'm getting in 2 buildings from St. James residents and St. Andrews, and they are with Related too. And we were told, and we came today to tell you all that we have had people telling us when we came into the place that we had 25 years to live there. Okay? And I've got to have a few more years before I get shut down. And what they're doing, they're going to kill them and knock it down.
Oh, yeah.
That's what he's going to be doing.
Absolutely.
He's going to, both of them.
He's going to be moving you all out west.
All out. I don't know where we're going to be. And like you said, I've never felt so beautiful for the windows in our buildings. And they have fixed, supposedly, they redid them for us. But now they're saying what they're telling you is that the place is going to shut down. It's not well kept. And it's because of them. We don't even have anybody to come and take things with us be sure that our things that we need in the apartments that we can't get. We have floods in there. There's different things, and it's nothing that we have tried to do. So what I'm asking you, please, please, do not keep us that way. Don't let this come in. I know that Related, I thought was a nice person. I talked to him when I first came in, and I thought it was okay, but boy, do I not think now. No, I don't. I don't agree with it. And I don't know where I can go and what all of us that we can do. It's not going to be fair for us to know. And so I just can't believe that I have to know when I'm going to be having to take away all my stuff.
Ma'am, the only thing that I can mention is we have not heard anything regarding St. James's and St. Andrews.
So you
There's
haven't?
no conversations about removing those buildings.
Wow.
There are no discussions. We have not received any applications, nothing.
Well, this is the same thing because theirs are having problems with that. And there's another girl that had just changed and come to us. And now they have to move right next to Publix up there. And there's another place that he's bought. And so now he's already telling them that they get in June, they have to move out now. And I'm afraid that's what it does. I don't want to do it. I'm from North Carolina. And I really do not want to leave my apartments. And I know all these people that came with me today. And I'm telling you, please, don't let this go on. Because our apartments aren't that bad. He had redone them completely.
Thank you.
But now he's telling us all this other stuff that's going on. And he's not doing right.
We have not received any application for that. Thank you.
Okay.
Wanda Williams?
Thank you very much. This has been very informative. And I am here with Nancy. Nancy lives in St. James. I live in St. Andrews. And we are now under a project-based voucher system in St. Andrews. And most of the people who live in those two buildings are Section 8 eligible, which means very low income. However, most of us have tried in our lives. And, you know, there's a stigma attached to Section 8 and HUD housing because there's sort of an unspoken idea that, well, those people, you know, they didn't try, they're mentally ill, that, you know, they're failures. I'm here to tell you that you can play by the rules and work really hard, but things don't always turn out well for you. So in addition to what Nancy has said, I had two questions that were directly from some of the documents that you alluded to. One was the December 9, 2025 visioning discussion, number 4. And the other one was the recommended zoning in January of 2026. And in the number 4, page 9, where it addresses the housing developer, affordable housing, production funding, and incentive FAR. And specifically, it gives the base, as you mentioned earlier, of the $17 per square foot incentive. And then it has 3 options that are plus onto the base. And one of them indicates, and this is a quote, cannot receive any public assistance to reduce unit cost. And that's very concerning to us. Now, I'm not certain that I understand in context exactly what that means, but we are concerned. And, you know, as Nancy said, even though you've indicated you've heard nothing about the possibility of St. James and St. Andrews being razed to the ground, logical inference can be made from, for example, one of the PowerPoints on page 27 of this particular document to which I've just alluded, where we see the 100-foot setback from the west curb of Flagler, and 100-foot back from the west curb of Flagler would probably go into our lobby desk area. So it means that St. Andrews could not be there. And in that particular drawing is a 22-story building, and one wonders, and of course this is not evidence, but why 22 stories? Is there a contract somewhere for a new building that's 22 stories instead of this 25? Or is this just purely, you know, a diagram? Another concern that we have is that even though Mr. Ross signed a use agreement with the former owner, the Episcopal Diocese of Southeast Florida, for 20 years, that those buildings from August 25, 2021, which is the closing date when Mr. Ross purchased those buildings through his Ross companies, that particular corporation. He signed that use agreement that these would remain affordable housing, not affordable workforce. There's a great difference, and the word affordable can be very misleading. Affordable for us is not affordable for younger people who are still gainfully employed, and thank God for them. Most of us are no longer able to work. But one of the concerns I have in conjunction with this is that in doing a little bit of research, I found that an executive VP of related Ross, Mr. Jordan Rathlev, R-A-T-H-L-E-V, I think was the spelling, sits on two of the key committees in regards to this DMP, the steering committee and the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, which is, as I understand it, mandated by Florida statute. And so it almost seems, wow, he has this sewn up. He's on the steering committee, he's on the Affordable Housing Committee. And I realize, you know, I mean, we can make assessments and they're not always accurate, and I hope that the thinking that I have on that is inaccurate. But we need a voice too. And even though Mr. Ross did some renovation, I must say that it's somewhat bogus. We still have mold in the building that supposedly was addressed by a company that arrived on our ramp in the back in unmarked white vehicles. The two owners who introduced themselves as owners, I found out through the state of Florida, were unlicensed. And so then I had to go through and try to find out who is licensed in this company, because it's required under state statute.
If you want, we can talk with you afterwards and address those issues. We can go ahead with other comments, but I hear you, the two of you. We can get your contact information and we can clarify some things for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Danielle Casey.
Hi, I always go down the row. Sorry to hear about that. That's pretty pitiful. Hi, Danielle Casey here. I represent 1909. We're a co-working space and incubator right on Clematis. We serve 240 small businesses, and our churn rate is going up exponentially, and that's because we can't afford parking. For 4 months, there has been absolutely no parking passes available in downtown in the Avernia Garage and Banyan Garage. None whatsoever, forcing our small business owners and early stage startups to pay $20 a day for parking. Not attainable, not affordable. It seems as though there's incentives for affordable, I hate the word, but affordable housing for these developers. I do think there's absolutely ways that we could be doing subsidized commercial rent for our small businesses and entrepreneurs. Thank you, sir, on the end over there. You did mention something about that. I think that There's other cities, and we are happy to have conversations. We combined have served over 1,000 small business owners, have given $66 million in economic impact. We think about this all the time, and we absolutely would love to sit down with somebody and think through the potential opportunity with these developers and what a subsidized rent could look like. But we've never been given that opportunity. And it's these types of rooms that we have to come into, and we get very little time to talk. It's pitiful. Something has to change, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you for that comment. Rick Gonzalez.
Good evening, Ana Maria, and good evening, Bernard and team. I've lived here, now I'm going on my 41st year. So I've lived here 1/3 of the history of West Palm Beach. And you and I have had a lot of differences over the years, and a lot of good things and a lot not so good things. And Bernard, you're a real urbanist, and I appreciate your work. I like to call myself an old urbanist, which means I prefer cities like Madrid or Washington or Paris. And it's okay, because New York is also very exciting. And this city is become, in the last 40 years, a very exciting place. My screen shuts off over here, excuse me. Cheap computer, cheap damn phone. And so I can live, I can work, I can play in West Palm Beach. And now I can also learn and pray. I'm worried about our churches. We've lost our Jewish temple on North Flagler. They're gone. I don't know where they're going, but they're gone from our downtown. All right, so what's going to happen with what was an amazing city when it started? Everybody got a church site here, Episcopalians, Catholics, everyone, you know? I hope we don't lose that. That gives flavor to our city, so I hope we can do something about that. We live in a climate that's very hot and humid. I've been watching it for 41 years. Microclimates right on Clematis and Narcissus. You can just walk it any day of the year, and it's 5 degrees cooler there than it is anywhere out west. We have topography. We have a hill. I like to joke on my walking tours, if I go west, I need an oxygen mask because it's too high, right? And the waterfront's 6-7 feet above sea level, right? What are we going to do about that? We now have festivals that are here. Help me with it. Festivals that are now taking 3-4 weeks. And when they shut down Flagler Drive, Bernard, I wish you were here. It is a effing nightmare. And I'm so happy I bought on North Flagler, 15 blocks. And I wish you could show the map, that beautiful map of the extended downtown area with the city for your transportation map. If you could just show that, if you could just please for a minute, because I think I'm a stakeholder, yet I wasn't invited to participate in any stakeholder events here, because I have a lot of history here. I love this place. It's a great place. We've had great careers over here, right? You know, so, and I'm glad a lot of people, bring them all down. We'll find space for them. You'll find space when you start thinking about downtown as that yellow area there, which I've been thinking about for a very long time. We need to expand our downtown. We need to go north to Curry Park and south to the Norton Museum. We just have to create more space for us. You know, we need to do that. Our grid. Clematis has a very unique fork. It's called Clematis North and South. It was there since day one. I'm sorry, Bernard, but what the unsolicited proposal did to all the hard work that you've been doing as a professional, is disgraceful. For someone to come in here now and show these site plans with cul-de-sacs, little weird things, you know, Flagler or Narcissus, what are we smoking? It's insane. They've been doing very hard work for the last, I don't know, years, 18 months, and for that to come out yesterday, that's not fair to your consultant. That's not fair to you and your team in the office. That's not right. And obviously it's not them who's designing that. Some unsolicited proposal that had an unsolicited land planner or architect doing that. Examples, please don't use downtown Miami examples. We have 2 towers. We have 2 towers here, right down the street. Another great guy, okay? 6 years under construction. Miamification of West Palm Beach does not need to continue. Please, look at Sarasota. Look at St. Pete. Somebody mentioned shade. I think the commissioner mentioned shade. I can walk anywhere in this city any day of the year. I've been doing it for 40 years on purpose. I just need to find the shady side. Seriously. And I can do it from my office on Clematis to City Place. And when it's hot, you find the shade. And we've done a great job with trees, beautiful trees on Olive and Datura. It's so nice to walk in our city. And canopies and arcades. Sarasota has phenomenal canopies. St. Pete has canopies and vias. You mentioned the cross streets. Absolutely, we got to do that. I love the new plan compared to the plan 15 years ago because you're making everything green. It was all walkable streets. You know, I love it. But there are areas like Flagler, the whole Flagler thing, besides this crazy idea for this crazy park, there's 14 blocks. Of those 14 blocks, there's maybe 3 blocks, and now 4, since I heard the church wants to put a 20-some story, I don't know where, on the north side, because there's no backside to the church. So call it 4 blocks out of 14 blocks. We're doing this plan for 4 blocks out of 14 blocks. Let's focus on the other stuff, on the TOD. Let's focus on connecting Brightline to Tri-Rail. You know, making that really work really good there. Go 40 stories there. Go do something, you know, where we can really make this a walkable city that works really well. The liners, brand new office building, 300 Banyan, beautiful. It's got you talk about light coming out of the apartments of the liners. We got light coming out of the garage on that building. You know, 360 did a great job over in Rosemary. They did you know, what you've been talking about, beautiful. That's a great prototype. One Flagler, great prototype. The best so far, in my opinion. I know a lot of people don't like this. They preserved the historic building. They didn't butcher it like they butchered other buildings. They added a beautiful New York type park. It's gorgeous. I love going to that little park and sitting there. And a slim, exactly what you're talking about. The tall building, slim with the garage. Too bad the garage doesn't have any liners. Think about liners for office. Us small people, we're getting kicked out of here. Thank God I bought a small office space 6 years ago. Otherwise, I wouldn't be in downtown. I know so many people, besides the incubator program, it's the next level, right? There's people like me, 4,000 square feet to 1,000 square feet. You know, the parking's very expensive, you know, but let's think about not just affordable housing, but no building should have a liner. No, that office building should never have been built like that. They should have done something, you know, to do either affordable office or affordable residential. Keep the alleys, please. Make them activated. That's a great example of what they did over there with the Greek Cafe. It's actually in a historic building, in the new building, indoors, outdoors, with a canopy. It has everything, right? Is that like it's expensive as hell, but man, it is. It is New York prices, but I like to go there once in a while. I'm almost done. I apologize. I really wanted to do this a lot sooner, but incremental development. I don't do big build. Well, I've done one big building design, a 70-story Miami. I just finished it, and let me tell you, working in that city, don't bring that over here. You know, please. It's you know. It's bad. I mean, incremental development. I think Brian mentioned, you know, constant and probably right, small lot owners coming in trying to get a variance to do. We should have 0 parking for 100 by 100 foot lot. Anything less than a quarter acre should just be please do a beautiful building. 2, 3, 4, 5 stories. I'm doing one right now, 3 stories on North Olive and a 5-story on North Delray Beach. Very little parking because I had to put parking. So no parking would be fabulous. I think that's it, right? I think that's, well, oh, last one, sorry. Historic. Now, if you're going to keep that nice height range along Flagler, then let me share an idea with you. We have beautiful historic buildings here that need a lot of work. As you know, a historic building every 20 to 30 years needs to be redone, just because of the climate that we have here, right? St. Anne's, we have twice the TDRs. You mentioned it. Thank you, Ana Maria. Okay. Our office building's an 8-story historic building and needs a lot of work. There are other historic buildings. So if you're going to zone it to 30 stories and we're in an 8-story building, allow us to sell whatever that value is, like the TDR programs, to redo our buildings, because we need, I'm not kidding you, we're 30 small business owners in this building. We need $5 to $7 million to fix that building. And we don't have the pockets, we're not related to redo our historic guarantee building. It's one of the old, it's the first high-rise in downtown, the first boom 100 years ago. So please, consider my thoughts. Don't mean to insult anyone. I love your work, it's been great. I just hope that it gets a lot better. And I look forward to see the next reiteration of the project. Thank you, Bernard.
Thank you. So the last one is Jason Abrams.
Hi, Jason Abrams, local developer architect. I just have a question. If you guys did a study that looked at your building footprint and you compared it as far as the rising cost of construction and also where sales are, because just looking at what some of those developments are as far as the floor area ratio, and after doing so many of these different projects, I know a lot of times the reason why a lot of developers need more height or they need more space is because the math just doesn't work, especially once you add affordable housing to it. And then now how does that also factor into the fact that when you guys go to sell these units, if you're trying to keep that footprint skinny, you're gonna need so much floor area or so much height just to make the math work. So I was just wondering if that was something that was brought up or something that was considered. That's it.
I mean, Bernard already talked about that. They did all the studies of how to accommodate the FAR on the different sites, sizes, and how to fit it with the envelope that is being proposed.
We didn't do any cost studies. We're looking at volume and development. But one thing I've learned over the years is the seller of the land is part of the formula. So when the land costs keep going up, so does the eventual overall cost go up. So you got to keep in mind that the zoning is not about trying to predict what's going to happen. It's about trying to predict the maximum that's going to happen. And that is where people get confused by looking at diagrams, because we're not designing buildings, we're only testing. And we're not analyzing cost. We're simply trying to understand the impact of what would happen if somebody built to the maximum of what's allowed. Now, not every developer wants to do that, and not every building type will require that. But we think most developers will want to build to the maximum, but a big part of the cost is the increasing land cost. So we can't really write zoning trying to anticipate cost. We're looking at quality of life, we're looking at ultimate build out, we're looking at the things that we know we can assess, but the cost of things is changing all the time, so there's just no way.
The budget?
Assessing the allowable buildable area. It's not about the cost, because the cost, who can predict what the cost is? Impossible.
You speak about Highline, and New York is in $2 billion debt because Keith Ross's plan didn't work out. And Keith James is giving away property for $10. So he's right. How do those projections look? I mean, Keith Ross gets, land worth millions of dollars for $10 so that it projects out. This is the way it looks over 10 years. We should know we're giving away land for $10.
We're not giving away any land for $10. Thank you.
We'll go back. Do we have more cards? Did you put a card in?
No.
Did you put a card in, ma'am? Go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, that was the last comment. We appreciate your patience and your input. On the screen, you can see the schedule for the next hearings. So it will happen. Downtown Action Committee is the next one on May 13, 9 a.m. if you want to come and provide more input. If you have any additional questions, you can always contact us. We're ready to answer any questions and receive any additional input. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Anna Maria. Thank you.